Hello everyone, I'm the DreamTeller and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The creak of the floorboard above my head made my heart skip a beat. I froze, remote control halfway to my mouth as I'd been absently chewing on it while binging my favorite show. It was probably nothing, I told myself, trying to shake off the sudden chill that ran down my spine. Old houses make noises all the time, right? But as I sat there in the dim light of the TV, straining my ears, I heard it again, a distinct shuffle, like someone trying to move quietly but failing. My parents weren't due back from their weekend getaway until tomorrow evening. I was supposed to be alone in this house. I muted the TV, my eyes darting to the ceiling. The silence was deafening, broken only by the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then, a soft thud, like something being knocked over. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. No response, of course. What was I expecting? If there was an intruder, they weren't going to politely announce themselves. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling as I pulled up my dad's number. But I hesitated before hitting call. What if it was nothing? I'd look like an idiot, ruining their first vacation in years over a squirrel in the attic or my overactive imagination. Another creak, this time from the hallway at the top of the stairs. Closer. Screw it. I'd rather look stupid than dead. I hit call and pressed the phone to my ear, eyes locked on the darkened staircase visible from my spot on the couch. One ring. Two rings. My dad's cheerful voicemail greeting hit my ear like a punch to the gut. Of course. They were probably at that fancy restaurant with no cell reception. I hung up and immediately dialed 911, my breathing short and rapid. As the dispatcher answered, another sound froze the blood in my veins. The unmistakable squeak of a door hinge, the one on my parents' bedroom door that Dad kept meaning to oil. 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. My eyes were fixed on the top of the staircase, where a shadow had just appeared. Hello, is anyone there? I found my voice, little more than a whisper. There's someone in my house? The shadow moved, descending the first step. In the faint glow from the TV, I caught a glimpse of something metallic in their hand. What's your address, ma'am? The dispatcher's calm voice seemed to come from a million miles away. I rattled off my address, surprising myself with how steady I managed to keep my voice. Years of babysitting had taught me how to project calm even when I was anything but. Officers are on their way. Are you in a safe place? Can you get out of the house? The figure was halfway down the stairs now, moving slowly, cautiously. They hadn't seen me yet, curled up in the corner of the couch, but there was no way I could make it to the front door without passing the staircase. No, I breathed into the phone. They're between me and the exit. I'm in the living room. Okay, stay calm. Find a place to hide if you can. Don't disconnect the call. Hide. Right. My eyes darted around the room, seeking any possible refuge. The coat closet. No, too obvious. Under the couch. I'd never fit. The window. Maybe I could. The floorboard at the bottom of the stairs creaked. My gaze snapped back to the intruder, now fully visible in the dim light. It was a man, tall and lean, dressed all in black. In his right hand, he held what looked like a large knife. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud as a drum in my ears. The man's head turned, scanning the room. Any second now, he'd spot me. In that moment of paralyzing fear, a memory flashed through my mind. Last summer, playing sardines with my cousins. The weird hiding spot that had won me the game. Moving on pure instinct, I slid off the couch as quietly as I could, phone still clutched to my ear. In 3 quick steps, I was at the entertainment center. I yanked open the cabinet beneath the TV where we kept the gaming consoles. What's happening? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. Hiding, I whispered. already contorting my body to fit into the small space. Thank God I was short and skinny. I pulled the cabinet door closed behind me, leaving it open just a crack. The darkness inside was absolute. I could hear footsteps now, slow and deliberate, moving around the room. My lungs burned as I tried to control my breathing, terrified that even the slightest sound would give me away. "Police should be there any minute," the dispatcher said softly. "Stay quiet and don't move unless you have to." The footsteps paused, then started again, closer this time. I pressed myself further back into the cabinet, feeling the hard edges of the Xbox digging into my back. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp as something bumped against the entertainment center. For several agonizing seconds, all I could hear was the sound of drawers being opened and closed. He was searching the room methodically. It was only a matter of time before he checked the cabinets. A siren wailed in the distance, growing rapidly louder. The footsteps stopped abruptly. "They're almost there," the dispatcher said. "Just hold on." The siren cut off suddenly. They must be right outside. I heard the crackle of a police radio, muffled voices. Then, a loud bang that made me jump. "Police! Open up!" The footsteps in the living room turned into a run. I heard the back door slam open, then the sound of breaking glass. He was escaping through the kitchen, more shouting outside, the thud of running feet. Then, silence. I stayed frozen in my hiding spot, unsure if it was safe to come out. The dispatcher's voice in my ear made me flinch. "The police are in the house. You can come out now. Tell them who you are right away." Slowly, I pushed open the cabinet door, wincing as my stiff muscles protested the movement. I crawled out just as a beam of light swept across the room. "Police, show yourself." I stood up, hands raised. "I'm Sarah. I live here. I'm the one who called." The flashlight lowered, revealing a police officer in full tactical gear. "Are you hurt, Sarah?" I shook my head, suddenly feeling lightheaded as the adrenaline began to wear off. "No, I don't think so." The next hour passed in a blur. More officers arrived, asking questions, dusting for fingerprints. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a shock blanket, answering as best I could. My parents arrived in a panic, having finally gotten the voicemails I'd left. It wasn't until much later, after the police had gone and my parents had finally stopped hovering, that the full weight of what happened hit me. Lying in bed, every creak and groan of the house made me flinch. Sleep seemed impossible. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Lizzie, my best friend, asking if I was okay. She must have seen the police cars. I started to type out a response, then paused. How could I possibly explain what had happened? How close I'd come to... I didn't even want to think about it. In the end, I just sent back a simple, "I'm okay. Talk tomorrow." It was easier than trying to put into words the terror of those moments in the cabinet, certain that each breath might be my last. As I set my phone down, my gaze fell on the entertainment center. From this angle, I could just see the edge of the cabinet I'd hidden in. It looked so ordinary, just a plain wooden door, but it had saved my life. I shuddered, remembering the sound of those footsteps coming closer and closer. The glint of the knife in the intruder's hand. What would have happened if I hadn't remembered that hiding spot? If I'd been a little slower? Or if he'd thought to check that cabinet? My mind raced with what-ifs, each one more terrifying than the last. I knew, logically, that I was safe now. The police had increased patrols in the neighborhood. Dad had already called a security company about installing an alarm system. But logic did little to calm the fear that still thrummed through my veins. Every shadow seemed menacing, every unexpected sound a potential threat. The knowledge that someone had been in our house, moving through rooms we thought were safe, felt like a violation I wasn't sure how to process. I reached for my phone again, scrolling through my contacts. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, just to hear a friendly voice. But as my thumb hovered over Lizzie's name, I hesitated. How could I burden her with this? How could I explain the way my sense of safety had been shattered in a single night? In the end, I set the phone down without calling anyone. I curled up tighter under my blankets, eyes fixed on the bedroom door. Sleep continued to elude me as my mind replayed the night's events on an endless loop. As the first light of dawn began to creep through my window, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let this night define me. I would not let fear rule my life. Somehow, some way, I would find a way to feel safe in my own home again. But for now, in the quiet of the early morning, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened, to acknowledge the fear, the helplessness, the sheer luck that had seen me through. And as the tears finally came, I let them fall, a release of all the emotion I'd been holding back. Tomorrow, I would be strong. I would face the police questions, the concerned looks from neighbors, the inevitable nightmares. But for now, in this moment between night and day, I simply allowed myself to be, to feel, to breathe. And with each breath, I reminded myself, I survived. I'm still here. Whatever comes next, I can handle it. As the sun rose, painting my room in soft golden light, I felt the first stirrings of something that felt almost like hope. It would be a long road, but I would walk it, one day at a time, one step at a time, until home felt like home again. The headlights of my beat-up Chevy cut through the darkness, illuminating an endless ribbon of asphalt stretching out before me. I'd been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway broken only by the occasional flicker of my dashboard clock, reminding me just how late it was getting. That's when I saw him, a lone figure on the side of the road, thumb outstretched, his form materializing out of the gloom like a specter. I'd always been taught never to pick up hitchhikers. "It's not safe," my mom would say, her voice stern. "You never know who they might be." But as I drew closer, I could see the desperation in the man's posture, the slump of his shoulders that spoke of exhaustion and defeat. And besides, out here in the middle of nowhere, what were the chances of another car coming along? Before I could talk myself out of it, I was pulling over onto the gravel shoulder, kicking up a cloud of dust in my wake. The man jogged towards my car, his face breaking into a relieved smile as I rolled down the passenger window. "Thank you so much," he said, his voice gravelly and deep. "I've been out here for hours." Up close, I could see he was older than I'd first thought, probably in his late 50s or early 60s. His face was weathered, lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from years of hard living, but his eyes were bright and alert, almost unnervingly so in the dim light of my car's interior. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even as a tendril of unease began to curl in my gut. "Just up the road a ways," he replied, already reaching for the door handle. "There's a town about 50 miles from here. I can get off there." I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the lock button. But then I thought of how I'd feel if I were stranded out here in the middle of the night, watching car after car speed past without stopping. With a sigh, I hit the unlock button. "Hop in," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm headed that way myself." The man slid into the passenger seat, a battered duffel bag clutched to his chest. As I pulled back onto the highway, I caught a whiff of something unpleasant, a mixture of body odor and something metallic that I couldn't quite place. "I'm Jake," I offered, more to break the awkward silence than anything else. "John," he replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Thanks again for stopping. Not many people would these days." I murmured something non-committal in response, my mind already racing ahead to the town he'd mentioned. 50 miles. That was what, about 45 minutes at the speed I was going? I could handle 45 minutes. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle as John shifted in his seat. I kept stealing glances at him out of the corner of my eye, trying to get a read on him. There was something off about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "So, what brings you out this way?" I asked eventually, unable to bear the silence any longer. John was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice had taken on a strange, distant quality. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "Someone who wronged me a long time ago." A chill ran down my spine at his words, though I couldn't have said why. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "An old friend?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound that made me flinch. "Not exactly," he said, "but I'm going to find him. And when I do—" He trailed off, his hand tightening on the strap of his duffel bag. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Well, I hope you find them," I said, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. John turned to look at me then, his eyes glittering in the darkness. "Oh, I will," he said, his voice low and intense. "I've been searching for a long time, but I'm close now. I can feel it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My hands were clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles had gone white. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to pull over and tell this man to get out of my car, but we were in the middle of nowhere, and I was afraid of what he might do if I tried to leave him here. So I kept driving, the miles ticking by with agonizing slowness. John had fallen silent again, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. The air in the car felt thick, oppressive, and I found myself struggling to breathe. "You know," John said suddenly, making me jump. "You remind me of him, the man I'm looking for." My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he must be able to hear it. "Is that so?" I managed to choke out. John nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "Yeah, same build, same hair color, even the same kind of car." He paused, his hand dipping into his duffel bag. "It's funny how things work out sometimes, isn't it?" I didn't respond, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. In the distance, I could see lights. The town we were heading for, just a few more miles. I could make it. "You want to know something else funny?" John continued, his voice taking on a sharp edge. "I never told you what kind of car he drove." My blood ran cold. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, I felt something cold and hard press against my ribs. "Pull over," John said, all pretense of friendliness gone from his voice. "Now." My mind was racing, trying to figure out a way out of this. But with a gun, I was sure that's what it was, pressed against my side. I didn't have much choice. Slowly, my hands shaking, I guided the car onto the shoulder of the road. "Turn off the engine," John commanded. I did as he said, my movements robotic. As soon as the key was out of the ignition, John snatched it from my hand. "Now, we're going to have a little chat," he said, his voice eerily calm. "And you're going to tell me everything I want to know about that night 10 years ago." I stared at him, confusion mingling with terror. "What are you talking about?" I stammered. "I don't know anything about—" The gun dug harder into my side, cutting off my words. "Don't lie to me," John snarled. "I know it was you. You took everything from me that night. My wife, my kids, my life. And now, I'm going to take yours." Realization dawned on me with horrifying clarity. He thought I was someone else, the man he'd been searching for all this time. "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "There's been a mistake. I'm not who you think I am. My name is Jake Thompson. I'm 25 years old. I work at a software company in the city. Whatever happened 10 years ago, I had nothing to do with it." John's eyes narrowed, doubt flickering across his face for just a moment before hardening into resolve. "Nice try," he growled, "but I've been looking for you for too long to fall for your lies now." My mind was spinning, desperately trying to find a way out of this nightmare. "Look in my wallet," I said quickly. "My driver's license is in there. It'll prove who I am." For a long moment, John just stared at me, his eyes boring into mine as if trying to see into my soul. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "But if you try anything..." He didn't need to finish the threat. I could feel the gun, a constant reminder of the danger I was in. With shaking hands, I reached for my wallet, pulling out my driver's license and holding it up for him to see. John squinted at it in the dim light, his brow furrowing. I held my breath, praying that this would be enough to convince him. This can't be right," he muttered, snatching the license from my hand to examine it more closely. "It is right," I insisted, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not the man you're looking for. Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone about this, I swear." John looked up at me, confusion and anger warring on his face. For a moment, I thought he might actually believe me, but then his expression hardened once more. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No, this is just another trick. You've had 10 years to set this up, to create a new identity, but I know it's you. I'd never forget your face." My heart sank. There was no reasoning with him. In his mind, I was the man who had destroyed his life, and nothing I could say would convince him otherwise. "Get out of the car," John ordered, gesturing with the gun. "Please." I tried one last time. "You don't have to do this. Whatever happened to you, I'm sorry. But killing me won't make it right." For a split second, I saw something flicker in John's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or maybe even a glimmer of the man he used to be before grief and anger had twisted him into this. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "Out," he repeated, his voice cold and final. With no other choice, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. John followed, keeping the gun trained on me as he circled around to my side of the car. "Start walking," he said, gesturing towards the darkness beyond the road. As I took my first stumbling steps away from the safety of the highway, I couldn't help but think of all the people who would never know what had happened to me. My parents, my friends, my co-workers. Would they spend years searching for me, like John had searched for the man who had wronged him? Or would I simply become another unsolved mystery, a cautionary tale about the dangers of picking up strangers? I had no way of knowing how this night would end. But as I walked into the darkness with John close behind, I made a silent promise to myself. If I somehow made it out of this alive, I would never again ignore my instincts, and I would certainly never pick up another hitchhiker. The lights of the town glimmered in the distance, so close and yet impossibly far away. As John urged me further from the road, those lights began to fade, leaving us alone in the vast, uncaring darkness of the desert night. The ancient grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, its deep, resonant tones echoing through the empty house. I jolted awake, my heart racing as I tried to shake off the lingering tendrils of a nightmare I couldn't quite remember. For a moment, I couldn't recall where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The Hendersons, sprawling Victorian, the house-sitting gig that had seemed like such a cushy way to make some extra cash. I'd been here for 3 days now, and I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. Maybe it was just the creaks and groans of an old house settling, or the way the wind whistled through the eaves on stormy nights. But there were times when I could have sworn I heard footsteps in empty rooms, or caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. Shaking my head to clear the cobwebs of sleep, I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The hardwood floor was cold beneath my bare feet as I padded across the guest room to the ensuite bathroom. I splashed some water on my face, trying to banish the last vestiges of my unsettling dream. As I reached for a towel, a soft thud from somewhere in the house made me freeze. I held my breath, straining my ears. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, there it was again, a muffled bump, like something heavy being knocked over. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and uncertain in the vast emptiness of the house. No response, of course. I was alone here, or at least, I was supposed to be. I crept out of the bathroom, my eyes scanning the darkened bedroom. Nothing seemed out of place, but the shadows cast by the moonlight streaming through the windows seemed deeper, more menacing than before. Another thud, louder this time, coming from downstairs. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I should call the police, I thought. But what would I tell them? That I heard a noise in a creaky old house? Instead, I found myself moving towards the bedroom door, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't quite explain. The hallway outside was pitch black, the darkness so thick it seemed almost tangible. I fumbled for my phone, using its faint glow to light my way as I crept toward the stairs. The grandfather clock ticked away steadily, each second feeling like an eternity as I descended the staircase. The old wood creaked beneath my weight, and I winced at every sound, certain that whatever or whoever was down here would hear me coming. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my phone's light barely penetrating the gloom of the expansive foyer. To my left was the living room, to my right the dining room, straight ahead the kitchen. Where had that noise come from? A soft whisper of movement from the living room made my decision for me, hard in my throat. I inched towards the doorway, my free hand groping along the wall for the light switch. I found it, flicked it on, and immediately wished I hadn't. The sudden brightness was almost painful after the darkness, and for a moment, I was blind, blinking rapidly as my eyes adjusted. When my vision cleared, I almost screamed. The living room was in chaos. Furniture had been overturned, books and knickknacks strewn across the floor. And there, in the center of it all, stood nothing. I blinked, certain I must be seeing things, or rather not seeing things, because I could have sworn, in that split second before my eyes adjusted, I'd seen a figure standing there, tall, indistinct, more shadow than substance. But now, the room was empty save for the mess. "Hello?" I called again, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Not even the tick of the grandfather clock reached me here. The quiet was absolute, oppressive. I took a hesitant step into the room, glass crunching beneath my bare feet. I hissed in pain, looking down to see I'd stepped on the shattered remains of a photo frame. The picture inside was of the Hendersons, Mr. and Mrs. and their 2 kids, nigger, all smiling at the camera. But as I watched, the image seemed to ripple, the smiles turning to screams, the eyes going dark and hollow. I jerked back with a yelp, the frame clattering to the floor. When I looked again, the photo was normal, the family's frozen smiles unchanged. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I was still half asleep, caught in some bizarre waking dream. That's when I felt it. A cold breath on the back of my neck, raising goosebumps on my skin. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty doorway, the dark hallway beyond. "This isn't funny," I said to the empty room, trying to inject some anger into my voice to mask the fear. "If someone's here, show yourself." As if in response, a low moan echoed through the house, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a sound of pure anguish, sending shivers down my spine. I backed away, my foot catching on an overturned end table. I stumbled, falling hard onto my back. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment, I lay there gasping. When I could breathe again, I pushed myself up onto my elbows and froze. There, at the edge of the room, was a figure. Just as I'd thought I'd seen before, it was more shadow than substance, its edges blurred and indistinct. But I could make out the vague shape of a head, shoulders, arms hanging limply at its sides. I scrambled backward, my mouth opening in a silent scream. The figure didn't move, didn't seem to even acknowledge my presence. It just stood there, swaying slightly as if caught in some unfelt breeze. "What are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure's head turned towards me, though I could make out no features in its shadowy face. For a long moment, we stared at each other, frozen in a tableau of fear and something else. Sadness. Longing. I couldn't quite place the emotion that seemed to radiate from the spectral form. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. One moment it was there. The next, it had simply ceased to be, leaving me alone in the wrecked living room. I sat there for what felt like hours, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, my eyes darting around the room for any sign of the ghostly visitor. But there was nothing, just the overturned furniture, the scattered debris, and the oppressive silence. Slowly, on shaking legs, I got to my feet. I needed to get out of here, to call someone. The Hendersons, the police, a priest, anyone. But as I turned towards the door, movement caught my eye. One of the books scattered on the floor had fallen open. As I watched, its pages began to turn, faster and faster, as if caught in a strong wind. But the air in the room was still, not even a breeze from the open windows. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving closer, drawn by a curiosity I couldn't explain. The pages stopped their frantic flipping as abruptly as they'd started, settling open to a specific page. I leaned in, squinting to read in the dim light. It was a history of the town, I realized, and there, circled in what looked disturbingly like dried blood, was a passage about the house I was in. The Henderson house, it read, built in 1887 by Thomas Henderson, has long been rumored to be haunted. Local legend tells of a tragic fire in 1902 that claimed the lives of Henderson's wife and 2 young children. Henderson himself disappeared shortly after Bow, never to be seen again. Some say he died of grief, while others claim he still wanders the halls of his former home, seeking reunion with his lost family. A chill ran down my spine as I read the words. I thought of the photo I'd seen, the family's smiles turning to screams. Was it possible? Could the house really be? A soft sound behind me made me whirl around. There, hovering in the doorway, was not one shadowy figure, but 4. A tall one, presumably Thomas Henderson, and 3 smaller ones, his wife and children. They didn't move, didn't speak. They simply stood there, watching me with eyeless gazes. I could feel the weight of their stares, heavy with decades of loneliness and loss. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I didn't know. The figures seemed to nod in unison, a gesture of acknowledgement or perhaps forgiveness. Then slowly, they began to fade, becoming more and more transparent until they disappeared entirely. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed again. 1 o'clock. Had only an hour passed. It felt like a lifetime. I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. The house was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the oppressive silence of before, but a peaceful stillness, as if some long-held tension had finally been released. I don't know how long I sat there, processing what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, I finally stirred, my body stiff and sore. I should leave, I thought. Call the Hendersons. Tell them. What? That their house was haunted. That I'd had a mental breakdown and trashed their living room. Neither option seemed particularly appealing. But as I stood, something stopped me. A feeling. An intuition I couldn't quite explain. This house, these spirits, they weren't malevolent. They were lost, lonely, in need of understanding. I looked around the ruined living room and made a decision. I would stay. I would clean up this mess, and I would learn more about the Henderson family. Maybe, just maybe, I could help them find the peace they'd been seeking for over a century. As I began to straighten the overturned furniture, I felt a warmth settle over me, like a comforting embrace. And I knew, somehow, that I had made the right choice. This house, with all its secrets and sorrows, had chosen me. and I would do my best to honor that choice. The first drop of rain hit my face like an icy finger, snapping me out of my daze. I looked up at the sky, cursing under my breath as I saw the dark clouds rolling in. This was supposed to be a simple day hike, a chance to clear my head and enjoy some solitude. Now, as the light faded and the temperature dropped, I realized I'd made a critical error. I'd lost the trail. I pulled out my phone, hoping against hope that I'd somehow get a signal out here in the middle of nowhere. No such luck. The no service message mocked me from the top of the screen, a stark reminder of just how isolated I was. As the rain began to fall in earnest, I knew I had to find shelter. Continuing to wander aimlessly through the darkening woods was a recipe for disaster. I squinted through the gloom, searching for anything that might offer some protection from the elements. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light through the trees. It was faint, barely visible through the curtain of rain, but it was definitely there. A campfire, another hiker, or maybe, if I was really lucky, a ranger station. I hesitated for a moment, weighing my options. Approaching a stranger's camp in the middle of the night wasn't exactly safe, but neither was spending the night exposed to the elements. The sound of distant thunder made up my mind for me. I started towards the light, pushing through the underbrush as quickly as I dared in the growing darkness. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't a campfire I was seeing, but the warm glow of electric lights. Through the trees, I could make out the silhouette of a small cabin. Relief flooded through me. Surely whoever lived here would understand my predicament and let me wait out the storm. I emerged from the tree line into a small clearing. The cabin sat in the center, a quaint log structure that looked like something out of a storybook. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and comfort within. I approached the front door, suddenly aware of how I must look. Soaked to the bone, covered in mud and leaves. I tried to make myself as presentable as possible before knocking, but it was a lost cause. Taking a deep breath, I rapped my knuckles against the sturdy wooden door. For a long moment, there was no response. I was about to knock again when I heard movement inside. Footsteps approached, and then the door swung open. The man who stood in the doorway was not what I expected. He was older, probably in his 60s, with a wild mane of gray hair and a beard to match. His eyes, pale blue and surprisingly sharp, fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to take a step back. Hi, I said, my voice sounding small and uncertain. I'm sorry to bother you, but I got lost on the trail and then this storm hit. I was hoping I could maybe wait it out here, just until the rain stops. The old man didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, looking me up and down as if trying to decide if I was real or not. Just as the silence was starting to become unbearable, he spoke. "You'd best come in," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Can't leave you out there to drown." Relief washed over me as he stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. The interior of the cabin was small but cozy, dominated by a large stone fireplace where a fire crackled merrily. The walls were lined with bookshelves, every available surface covered in trinkets and curios that seemed to belong in a museum rather than a backwoods cabin. "Thank you so much," I said as I stepped inside, careful not to drip too much on the worn wooden floor. "I really appreciate this. I'm Jack, by the way." The old man grunted in acknowledgement. "Ezra," he said simply. "Bathroom's through there if you want to dry off. I'll see if I can find you some clothes that might fit." I nodded gratefully and made my way to the small bathroom he'd indicated. As I toweled off and changed into the slightly musty but blessedly dry clothes Ezra had provided, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. Maybe it was just the strangeness of the situation or the odd collection of artifacts scattered around the cabin, but there was a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that set my nerves on edge. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found Ezra sitting in an ancient armchair by the fire. a steaming mug in his hands. He nodded towards a similar mug on a small table nearby. "Sit," he said. "Drink. It'll warm you up." I did as he said, sinking into the chair opposite him and wrapping my hands around the warm mug. The liquid inside was dark and fragrant, some kind of herbal tea I didn't recognize. "So," Ezra said after a moment of silence, "what brings you out to these woods, Jack? Not many folks come out this way, especially not alone." I took a sip of the tea before answering, the warm liquid spreading through my body and chasing away the last of the chill. Just needed to clear my head, I guess. Things have been complicated lately. I thought a day in nature might help put things in perspective. Ezra nodded sagely. Nature has a way of doing that, of showing us what's really important. He paused, his eyes taking on a distant look. But it can be dangerous too, if you're not prepared. These woods, they have a way of testing a person. Something in his tone made me sit up a little straighter. What do you mean?" Ezra's gaze snapped back to me, suddenly sharp and focused. "Tell me, Jack, what do you know about the history of these woods?" I shook my head. "Not much, to be honest. I'm not from around here." A small smile played at the corners of Ezra's mouth. "No, I didn't think you were." He leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "These woods are old, Jack, older than you can imagine, and they have secrets." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with my damp clothes. "What kind of secrets?" Ezra's eyes gleamed in the firelight, the kind that most folks aren't ready to hear. "But you might be different. I can see it in your eyes. You're searching for something, aren't you? Something more than just a day's hike in the woods." I opened my mouth to deny it, but found I couldn't. He was right. I'd come out here looking for answers, though I couldn't have said to what questions. Ezra nodded, as if my silence was confirmation enough. "I thought so. Well, Jack, you might just have stumbled onto the right place. These woods, they have a way of giving people what they need, even if it's not what they think they want." He stood abruptly, moving to one of the crowded bookshelves. After a moment of searching, he pulled out an old, leather-bound book. "Here," he said, holding it out to me. "This might help you understand." I took the book hesitantly. It was heavy, the leather cover smooth and cool to the touch. There was no title, just an intricate design embossed on the front, a tree, its branches reaching up to encompass a crescent moon. "What is this?" I asked, running my fingers over the design. "A history," Ezra said, "of these woods, and the people who've lived here. People like me, people who've seen things." I looked up at him, a mix of curiosity and apprehension churning in my gut. "What kind of things?" Ezra's expression was unreadable. "Open it," he said simply. "Read. And then, well, we'll see if you're ready for what comes next." With trembling hands, I opened the book. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in dense, handwritten text interspersed with intricate drawings. As I began to read, I felt the world around me start to fade away. The crackling of the fire, the patter of rain on the roof. It all receded into the background as I lost myself in the tales contained within these pages. Stories of ancient rituals performed deep in the heart of the forest, of creatures that lurked in the shadows, neither fully animal nor human, of people who had ventured into these woods and returned, changed. I don't know how long I sat there reading. It could have been minutes or hours. When I finally looked up, I found Ezra watching me intently, a knowing look in his eyes. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I don't know. These stories, they can't be real, can they?" Ezra's smile was both sad and triumphant. "Oh, they're real all right, every last one of them. And now that you know, well, you have a choice to make." "A choice?" I echoed. my voice sounding strange to my own ears. He nodded. You can leave now. Go back to your life. Convince yourself that this was all just the ramblings of a crazy old man. Or, he paused, his eyes boring into mine. Or you can stay, learn, become part of something bigger than yourself. I looked down at the book in my hands, then back up at Ezra. Outside, the storm raged on. But in here, in this little cabin filled with secrets and ancient knowledge, I felt like I was standing on the precipice of something monumental. What happens if I stay? I asked, hardly daring to breathe. Ezra's smile widened. Then, my boy, your real journey begins. As if on cue, a loud crack of thunder shook the cabin. The lights flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness. When they came back on, I gasped. The cabin had changed. The walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, the artifacts on the shelves glowing with an inner light. And Ezra was transforming before my eyes. His human form melted away, replaced by something ancient and powerful and utterly inhuman. Welcome, the being that had been Ezra said, its voice resonating in my very bones, to the true heart of the forest. I knew then that my life would never be the same, that the choice I made in this moment would set me on a path I could never turn back from. And yet, as I looked into the eyes of this impossible creature, I felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense of rightness, as if I'd finally found the place I truly belonged. With a deep breath, I made my choice. I'll stay, I said. Teach me. The creature that had been Ezra nodded, a look of satisfaction crossing its otherworldly features. Then let us begin, it said. And as the storm raged outside and the magic of the forest swirled around us, I took my first step into a world I never knew existed, a world of wonder, of danger, and of endless possibilities. The acrid smell of burning rubber filled my nostrils as I pulled onto the shoulder of the desolate highway. Steam billowed from under the hood of my ancient Corolla, a testament to its final moments of life. I slumped forward, resting my forehead on the steering wheel. Of all the places to break down, it had to be here, miles from anywhere, with no cell service and darkness rapidly approaching. I stepped out of the car, the scorching summer heat hitting me like a wall despite the setting sun. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, shimmering in the distance like a mirage, not a single vehicle in sight. I popped the hood, more out of habit than any real hope of fixing whatever had gone wrong. As expected, the tangle of hoses and wires might as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all the sense I could make of it. Sighing, I pulled out my phone. No bars, just as I'd feared. I was about to toss it back into the car in frustration when a flicker of movement caught my eye. A car was approaching from the direction I'd come, little more than a dot on the horizon but growing larger by the second. Relief washed over me. Surely they'd stop to help, or at least let me use their phone to call for a tow. I waved my arms, trying to flag them down as they drew closer. The vehicle, I could see now it was an old station wagon, slowed as it approached. For a moment I thought they were going to stop. But then, to my dismay, it began to speed up again. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver, a middle-aged woman with a pinched expression, steadfastly avoiding eye contact. "Hey!" I shouted uselessly as the car disappeared into the distance. "Come on!" Frustration and fear warred within me as I watched my only chance at help vanish. The sun was sinking lower on the horizon, painting the sky in vivid oranges and purples, beautiful under different circumstances. Now, it only served as a reminder of how quickly night was falling. I paced beside my car, trying to come up with a plan. Walking wasn't an option. I had no idea how far the nearest town was, and the thought of being on foot on this isolated stretch of road in the dark was less than appealing. Sleeping in the car seemed like the safest bet, but I had no food or water. Plus, the thought of being a sitting duck all night made my skin crawl. As I debated my limited options, another set of headlights appeared in the distance. My heart leapt. A second chance. This time, I was determined not to let it pass me by. I positioned myself in the middle of my lane, waving my arms frantically. The approaching vehicle, a battered pickup truck, began to slow. Relief flooded through me as it pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind my car. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and lean, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He approached slowly, his expression neutral. "Having some trouble?" he called out as he drew closer. I nodded, suddenly feeling a bit sheepish about my dramatic flagging down. "Yeah, my car just died on me. I don't suppose you have a phone I could use. There's no service out here." The man pulled a cell phone from his pocket, glanced at it, and shook his head. "No bars? Sorry about that." He peered past me at my steaming engine. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest," I said, stepping aside. "Fair warning, though, I have no idea what I'm looking at in there." He chuckled, a warm, reassuring sound. "Don't worry. I've got a bit of experience with temperamental engines. Name's Ray, by the way." "Sarah," I replied, watching as he leaned over the engine, prodding at various components with practiced ease. After a few minutes of inspection, punctuated by the occasional or "I see," Ray straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Well, the good news is, it's not completely unsalvageable. The bad news is, it's not something I can fix here on the side of the road." My heart sank. "So what do I do?" Ray scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Tell you what, there's a town about 30 miles up the road. I can give you a lift there. They've got a decent mechanic who should be able to sort you out in the morning." I hesitated. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to get into a car with a stranger, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. But what choice did I have? Stay here and hope another good Samaritan came along before I died of thirst or heat stroke? Ray must have sensed my hesitation. "Look, I know it's not ideal," he said gently. "But I promise you, I'm not some axe murderer or anything. I've got a daughter about your age. I'd hope someone would help her out if she was in this situation." Something in his tone, in the kindness of his eyes, made me want to trust him. And really, what other option did I have? "Okay," I said finally. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." Ray nodded, seeming relieved. "All right then. Let's get your stuff, and we'll head out." I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat, locked the car, more out of habit than any real expectation it would deter thieves out here, and followed Ray to his truck. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. But it was too late to back out now. We pulled back onto the highway, my poor Corolla shrinking in the rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. The silence in the cab was thick, broken only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio as Ray fiddled with it, trying to find a station that would come in clearly. "So," Ray said after a few minutes, apparently giving up on the radio, "what brings you out this way? Not exactly a popular route for a road trip." I shrugged, keeping my eyes fixed on the darkening landscape outside. "Just needed to get away for a while, I guess. Clear my head." Ray nodded sagely. "I hear that. Sometimes a long drive is the best therapy there is." We lapsed back into silence. Despite my initial wariness, I found myself relaxing slightly. Ray seemed genuine in his desire to help, and his calm demeanor was reassuring. As we drove, the last vestiges of sunlight faded from the sky, leaving us in near total darkness broken only by the truck's headlights. The monotony of the highway was hypnotic, and I found my eyelids growing heavy. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, Ray was gently shaking my shoulder. "Sarah, wake up, hun. We're here." I blinked groggily, disoriented. We had pulled off the highway onto a narrow dirt road. In the gloom, I could make out the shapes of a few small buildings. "This is the town?" I asked, confusion and the first stirrings of alarm creeping into my voice. It looked more like an abandoned farm than any town I'd ever seen. Ray was already getting out of the truck. "It's just up ahead a ways. Thought we could stretch our legs for a bit before we get there." Every instinct I had was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. But what could I do? I was miles from anywhere, with no phone and no idea where I was. Reluctantly, I got out of the truck. The night air was cool on my skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of earlier. Ray was stretching, his back to me. I took the opportunity to glance around, looking for... what? A weapon? An escape route? "Beautiful night, isn't it?" Ray said, turning back to me. His expression had changed, the kindness in his eyes replaced by something cold and predatory. "Shame you won't be around to enjoy much more of it." Terror seized me, turning my blood to ice. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could make a sound, headlights suddenly illuminated the area, momentarily blinding me. Ray whirled around, cursing. Well, what the hell? As my eyes adjusted, I saw another vehicle pulling up, the station wagon from earlier. The woman who had passed me on the highway stepped out, a shotgun cradled in her arms. "Step away from the girl. Ray," she said, her voice hard. Ray's demeanor changed instantly, becoming obsequious. "Now, Martha, this isn't what it looks like." "Save it," Martha snapped. "I've been tracking you for months. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize your truck? That I'd just leave this poor girl to your tender mercies?" While they were focused on each other, I edged away, my heart pounding. What the hell was happening? Martha glanced at me. "You okay, honey? Did he hurt you?" I shook my head, still too shocked to speak. "Good," she said. "Now get in my car. I'm taking you to the real town, and we're going to have a long talk with the sheriff about our friend Ray here." I didn't need to be told twice. As I climbed into Martha's station wagon, I heard Ray pleading, making excuses. Martha's responses were curt and unsympathetic. As we pulled away, leaving Ray and his truck behind, the adrenaline that had been keeping me going suddenly drained away. I slumped in the seat, trembling. Martha glanced over at me, her expression softening. "You're safe now, honey. I'm sorry I didn't stop earlier. I had a hunch about what Ray was up to, but I needed to be sure before I confronted him." I nodded numbly, unable to fully process what had just happened, what had almost happened. As we drove towards the lights of an actual town in the distance, I found myself overcome with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering fear. I had come so close to becoming another statistic, another missing person whose fate would never be known. The events of the night played over and over in my mind. How quickly things had spiraled out of control, how close I had come to disaster, and yet, somehow, I had escaped. Thanks to Martha's intuition and courage, I was safe. As we pulled into the sheriff's office, I made a silent vow to myself. Never again would I be so trusting, so naive. The world was a dangerous place, filled with predators like Ray, but it also had its share of heroes like Martha. From now on, I would be more careful, more aware, and hopefully, someday, I might be able to pay forward the kindness and bravery that Martha had shown me tonight. For now, though, I was simply grateful to be alive and eager to put this nightmare of a night behind me. The first time I saw him, I thought nothing of it. Just another face in the crowd, a new neighbor moving into the house across the street. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right about Stephen Miller. It started with small things. The way he'd always be outside, watering his impeccably manicured lawn whenever I left for work. How he seemed to know my schedule better than I did, casually mentioning that I was home early today, or asking if I'd enjoyed my usual Saturday morning run. I couldn't remember ever telling him about my routines. At first, I brushed it off as friendliness, maybe even a touch of loneliness. After all, Stephen was new to the neighborhood, and from what I could gather, he lived alone. But then came the gifts. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the first one. A small, neatly wrapped package sitting on my doorstep. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet and clearly expensive. The card simply read, "For Jenny, from a friend." I was baffled. It wasn't my birthday, and I couldn't think of anyone who would send such an extravagant gift out of the blue. When I mentioned it to my best friend Lisa later that day, she joked that I might have a secret admirer. "Maybe it's that new neighbor of yours," she teased. "The one you said is always watching you." I laughed it off, but her words stuck with me. Could it be Stephen? But why? We'd barely exchanged more than pleasantries since he moved in. The gifts kept coming. A bouquet of my favorite flowers. How did he know I loved sunflowers? A first edition of a book I'd mentioned wanting to read, in a private conversation with Lisa over the phone. Each gift was accompanied by the same note. "For Jenny, from a friend." I started to feel uneasy. The attention, once flattering, now felt invasive. I began to notice other things too. The curtains in Stephen's front window would twitch when I walked by. His car would sometimes be parked a few houses down from mine when I got home from work, only to pull into his driveway moments after I entered my house. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my bedroom window. Peering through the curtains, I caught a glimpse of a figure ducking behind the bushes in my front yard. My heart raced as I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no one there. The officer took my statement, looking skeptical. "Are you sure you weren't just dreaming, ma'am? We haven't had any reports of prowlers in this area." I insisted on what I'd seen, but I could tell he didn't believe me. As he was leaving, Stephen emerged from his house, looking concerned. "Everything okay, Jenny?" he called out. "I heard a commotion." I forced a smile. "Just thought I saw something." "False alarm, I guess." Stephen nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "Well, if you ever need anything, day or night, I'm right across the street." A chill ran down my spine at his words. They should have been comforting, but something in his tone made them sound more like a threat than an offer of help. The next day, I installed a security system. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors, the works. It made me feel a little safer, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A week later, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar, my heart pounding. I called the police again. This time, they took it more seriously. They swept the house but found nothing missing. Just one thing out of place. A framed photo of me that usually sat on my bedside table was now on the kitchen counter. The officer suggested it might have fallen and I'd moved it without remembering, but I knew better. Someone had been in my house, touching my things, invading my privacy. That night, unable to sleep, I sat up reviewing the security footage. For hours, nothing. Then, at 2:17 a.m., a figure appeared on the screen. My blood ran cold as I recognized Stephen's distinctive gait. He walked up to my front door, pulled out what looked like a key, and let himself in. I felt sick. How long had this been going on? How had he gotten a key to my house? I watched, horrified, as he moved through my home with the familiarity of someone who'd done this many times before. The next morning, I went straight to the police station with the footage. They took my statement, promised to investigate, but warned me that it might take time. In the meantime, they suggested I stay with a friend. I called Lisa, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. She insisted I come stay with her immediately. As I packed a bag, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see Stephen watching me. But his house remained quiet, the curtains drawn. Just as I was about to leave, there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Through the peephole, I saw Stephen standing there, a concerned expression on his face. "Jenny, are you okay? I saw you packing a bag." I didn't respond, barely daring to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, he left, but not before sliding an envelope under the door. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a photo of me, sleeping in my bed. On the back, in now familiar handwriting, "For Jenny, from a friend." I fled to Lisa's house, terrified and angry. How dare he invade my privacy like this? How long had this been going on? The police promised to step up patrols in my neighborhood, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Stephen was too clever, too careful. Days passed, then weeks. I stayed at Lisa's, too afraid to return home. The police investigated, but without any concrete evidence of a threat. There wasn't much they could do. Stephen played the part of the confused, concerned neighbor perfectly. "I don't understand," he told the detectives, his voice dripping with sincerity. "Jenny and I are friends. I was just trying to be neighborly. If I've done something to upset her, I wish she'd just talk to me about it." It was maddening. I knew the truth, but I couldn't prove it. The security footage wasn't enough. Stephen claimed I'd given him a key for emergencies, and without proof to the contrary, it was his word against mine. My life fell apart. I couldn't go home, couldn't work, couldn't sleep without nightmares. Every time my phone rang or I got a text, I jumped, half expecting it to be from Stephen. Then, one night, everything changed. I woke up to find Lisa shaking me, her face pale with fear. "Jenny, wake up. Someone's trying to break in." I was instantly alert, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We could hear the sound of someone fumbling with the lock on the front door. Lisa grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, but I stopped her. "Wait," I whispered. "I have an idea." It was risky, maybe even stupid, but I was tired of being afraid, tired of letting Stephen control my life. It was time to turn the tables. We turned off all the lights and hid. Moments later, we heard the front door open, then close softly. Footsteps, cautious but familiar, made their way through the house. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give us away, but I forced myself to stay still, to stick to the plan. The bedroom door creaked open. A beam of flashlight swept across the room, landing on the bed where I should have been sleeping. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then hurried footsteps approaching the bed. That's when we struck. Lisa flipped on the lights as I leapt from my hiding place, pepper spray in hand. Stephen spun around, his eyes wide with shock and something else, a kind of manic glee that chilled me to the bone. "Jenny," he breathed, a smile spreading across his face. "I knew you'd understand eventually. I knew you felt the same way." "The only thing I feel is disgust," I spat, my finger on the trigger of the pepper spray. "You're sick, Stephen. You need help." His face darkened. "You don't mean that. We're meant to be together. I've watched you, protected you. Everything I've done has been for you." He took a step towards me, and I reacted instinctively, spraying him full in the face. He howled in pain, hands clawing at his eyes. Lisa was already on the phone with the police. Within minutes, we could hear sirens approaching. Stephen, still writhing on the floor, began to sob. "I just wanted you to love me," he wailed. "Why couldn't you love me?" As the police burst in, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over. Finally, truly over. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and court appearances. Stephen was arrested, charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and a host of other crimes. The evidence we'd gathered that night, combined with what the police found in his home, was damning. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life. I moved back into my house, though it took a long time before it felt like home again. I changed the locks, upgraded my security system, and started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma. Months later, as I sat on my front porch enjoying a beautiful summer evening, I realized something. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't jumping at every sound, I was just living. The scars of what Stephen did will always be with me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the potential dangers lurking behind friendly faces. But I refuse to let fear rule my life. I survived. I'm stronger, and I'm free. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I smiled to myself. Stephen had tried to possess me, to control me, to make me his. But in the end, the only person I belonged to was myself. And that was something no one could ever take away from me. The muffled thump from upstairs made me freeze, my hand hovering over the TV remote. It was past midnight, and I was alone in the house. Or at least, I was supposed to be. The kids I was babysitting, Ethan and Lily, had been tucked into bed hours ago, their parents not due back until morning. So what could have made that noise? I muted the TV, straining my ears in the sudden silence. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just as I was starting to convince myself I'd imagined it, I heard it again, a definite thud, followed by what sounded like scratching. My heart began to race. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Old houses make weird noises all the time, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't let it go. What if someone had broken in? What if the kids were in danger? Swallowing hard, I stood up from the couch. I should check on them, just to be safe. As I made my way towards the stairs, my eyes fell on the kitchen knife block. After a moment's hesitation, I grabbed the largest one. Better safe than sorry, right? The stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended, each sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet house. I paused at the top, listening. The scratching sound was clearer now, definitely coming from the direction of the attic. I checked on the kids first, poking my head into their rooms. Both were sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware of the knot of fear growing in my stomach. Relieved but still uneasy, I turned my attention to the attic door at the end of the hall. As I approached, the scratching grew more frantic. My palms were sweating, making the knife handle slippery in my grip. What was I doing? I should call the police, not confront a potential intruder armed with nothing but a kitchen knife and my own fear. But what if it was just a raccoon or something that had gotten in? I'd feel pretty stupid calling 911 over that. Besides, I couldn't leave the kids alone to wait outside for the police. Taking a deep breath, I reached for the attic door handle. It turned easily under my hand, not locked as I'd half hoped it would be. Slowly, I pushed it open. The hinges creaked ominously as the door swung inward, revealing the dark maw of the attic stairs. The scratching had stopped. In the silence, I could hear my own rapid breathing, loud in my ears. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "Is someone there?" No response, just the oppressive silence of the old house. I fumbled for the light switch, flicking it on. A bare bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered attic space. Boxes and old furniture loomed in the dim light, creating a maze of potential hiding spots. Gripping the knife tightly, I began to make my way up the stairs. Each step felt like an eternity, the old wood groaning under my feet. As I reached the top, my eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing seemed out of place, at least not that I could tell. But then again, I'd never been in this attic before. For all I knew, there could be someone hiding behind any of these piles of junk. "If someone's here, you need to leave now," I said, trying to inject some authority into my voice. "The police are on their way." It was a lie, but they didn't need to know that. Still nothing. Maybe it really had just been my imagination, or a mouse in the walls. Feeling slightly foolish but still on edge, I turned to head back downstairs. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I whirled around, the knife held out in front of me like a talisman. There, in the far corner of the attic, a pile of boxes shifted slightly. My breath caught in my throat. "That was no mouse. I know you're there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Come out slowly." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, to my horror, the pile of boxes began to move. But it wasn't a person emerging from behind them. The boxes themselves were shifting, rising up, taking on an impossible shape. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the attic door. This couldn't be happening. I must be dreaming, or hallucinating, or... The thing that had been hiding among the boxes fully revealed itself. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body a patchwork of cardboard and packing tape. Where a face should have been, there was only a crude drawing in marker, 2 circles for eyes and a jagged line for a mouth. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The creature took a step towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. The knife fell from my nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. "No," I managed to choke out. "This isn't real. You're not real." The creature paused, tilting its misshapen head to the side. Then, to my utter disbelief, it spoke. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a rasping whisper that sent chills down my spine. "Real enough," it said. "Real enough to be lonely." I blinked. Sure, I must have misheard. Lonely. The creature nodded, the motion causing some of its cardboard components to crinkle alarmingly. "So long," it said. "So long alone up here, watching, waiting, wanting a friend." My fear began to give way to confusion. This, whatever it was, didn't seem to want to hurt me. If anything, it sounded almost sad. "What are you?" I asked, my curiosity overriding my better judgment. The creature shuffled its feet, an oddly human gesture for something so inhuman. "Don't know," it admitted. "Was something else once, long time ago. Now just this." I found myself relaxing slightly, though I still kept a wary eye on the creature. "How long have you been up here?" "Many years," it said. "Many families, come and go, never stay, never see." My heart went out to the creature despite myself. How lonely must it have been, hidden away up here for who knows how long. "Why show yourself to me?" I asked. The creature's marker-drawn mouth seemed to curve upward in a smile. "You different," it said. "You listen, you hear." I was about to respond when a noise from downstairs made me jump. The front door opening, voices calling out. The parents were home early. Panic seized me. How could I possibly explain this? They'd think I was crazy or on drugs or both. I turned back to the creature, ready to, I don't know, beg it to hide. But it was already retreating, melting back into the pile of boxes it had emerged from. "Wait," I said, not sure why I was suddenly reluctant to see it go. It paused, those crude, drawn eyes somehow managing to convey a wealth of emotion. "Thank you," it said softly, "for seeing, for listening, won't forget." And then it was gone, indistinguishable from the other clutter in the attic. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Had it been real? Or had I dozed off watching TV and dreamed the whole thing? "Hello? Anyone home?" The voice from downstairs snapped me back to reality. Hastily, I grabbed the knife from where I'd dropped it and hurried down the attic stairs, closing the door behind me. I met the parents in the hallway, plastering what I hoped was a normal smile on my face. "Hi, you're back early." They explained that their event had ended sooner than expected. As I gathered my things to leave, I couldn't help glancing back towards the attic door. It remained closed, no sign of the extraordinary encounter I'd just had. As I drove home that night, my mind was reeling. Part of me wanted to dismiss it all as a vivid dream or a stress-induced hallucination. But another part, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, knew it had been real. I found myself wondering about the creature. How had it come to be? Were there others like it? And most pressingly, what would happen the next time I came to babysit? One thing was certain, I would never look at a pile of boxes the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, I'd volunteer to help clean out that attic someday. After all, everyone needs a friend sometimes. Even sentient cardboard monsters. As I pulled into my driveway, a smile tugged at my lips. Life, I realized, was far stranger and more wonderful than I'd ever imagined. And I couldn't wait to see what other secrets it might be hiding, just waiting for someone to listen. The shrill ring of my cell phone pierced the quiet of the evening, making me jump. I glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m. Who would be calling this late? The number on the screen was unfamiliar, local area code, but nothing I recognized. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. There was a moment of silence, then a low, gravelly voice spoke. "I can see you." A chill ran down my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, my heart suddenly racing. The voice chuckled, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Look out your window, Jake. Wave to me." My blood ran cold. How did this person know my name? And more importantly, how did they know where I was? I lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of town, house-sitting for a friend who was traveling abroad for a year. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving towards the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a sliver of the dark yard beyond. With trembling fingers, I pulled the curtain aside just an inch. Nothing, just the empty yard, bathed in moonlight. "I don't see anything," I said into the phone, a mixture of relief and confusion in my voice. "Look closer," the voice insisted. "I'm watching you, Jake. I'm always watching you." I let the curtain fall back into place and my mind racing. This had to be some kind of sick prank, right? But how did they know my name, my location? "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but this isn't funny. I'm hanging up now. And if you call again, I'm contacting the police." The voice laughed again, sending shivers down my spine. "Go ahead, Jake. Call them. They won't find anything, but I'll still be here watching. Always watching." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My hands were shaking as I finally lowered the device and my mind whirling with possibilities. A prank caller? A stalker? Or was I just losing my mind? I spent the next hour checking and rechecking every door and window in the house, peering out into the darkness for any sign of an intruder. But there was nothing. No footprints in the soft earth around the house. No disturbed branches in the surrounding trees. Everything was exactly as it should be. Eventually, exhaustion overtook my fear, and I fell into a fitful sleep. But my relief was short-lived. The next night, at exactly 11:42 p.m., my phone rang again. The same number. This time, I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. One new message. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. "You can't ignore me, Jake," the same gravelly voice said. "I'm still here, still watching. Sweet dreams." I deleted the message and blocked the number, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of mistake, or a very elaborate, very cruel joke. But the calls kept coming. Every night, at 11:42 p.m., from a different number each time. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. The voice was always the same, always insisting it could see me, always promising it was watching. I became paranoid, jumping at every shadow, flinching at every unexpected sound. I installed security cameras, motion sensor lights, even considered getting a dog. but nothing ever showed up on the cameras. The lights never triggered, and somehow, I knew a dog wouldn't help. After a week of this torment, I finally broke down and called the police. They were sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. Without any concrete evidence of a threat, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested changing my number, maybe staying with a friend for a while, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. This was my responsibility, my friend's house, and some stubborn part of me refused to be driven away by what might just be an elaborate prank. So I stayed, and the calls continued. It was on the 10th night that things changed. The call came as usual at 11:42 p.m. This time, I answered immediately. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice cracking with stress and lack of sleep. There was a pause, longer than usual. Then, "Come outside, Jake. It's time we met face to face." My blood ran cold. "No," I said firmly. "No way. I'm not falling for that." The voice chuckled, that same humorless sound I'd come to dread. "You don't have a choice, Jake. Come outside or I come inside. Trust me, you prefer the first option." The line went dead. I stood there, frozen in indecision. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to barricade the doors, call the police, do anything but go outside. But a small, tired part of me just wanted this to be over, one way or another. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was moving towards the front door. My hand shook as I turned the knob, easing it open as quietly as possible. The night was still, the air heavy with the promise of rain. I stepped out onto the porch, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. "Hello?" I called out, hating how weak and scared my voice sounded. "I'm here. What do you want?" For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, from the shadows at the edge of the yard, a figure emerged. Tall, unnaturally thin, its movements jerky and wrong. As it stepped into the moonlight, I felt my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Its limbs were too long, its head misshapen, its skin a sickly gray color that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless expanse of skin. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there frozen in terror, but my body wouldn't respond. I could only watch as the thing approached, its movements becoming smoother, more purposeful as it drew closer. It stopped at the foot of the porch steps, tilting its head to one side in an almost quizzical manner. Then, to my horror, a seam appeared in its featureless face, widening into a grotesque approximation of a mouth. "Hello, Jake," it said, in that same gravelly voice I'd heard on the phone. "It's so nice to finally meet you in person." I found my voice at last, though it came out as little more than a whisper. What are you?" The thing's mouth widened in what might have been a smile. "I am many things, Jake. A watcher, a keeper, a balancer of scales." "What does that mean?" I asked, my fear giving way to a morbid curiosity. "Why have you been tormenting me?" The creature tilted its head to the other side. "Tormenting?" "No, Jake. Preparing. You see, you're special. You can perceive things others can't, hear things others don't. It's why I chose you." My mind reeled. "Chose me for what?" "To join us," it said simply. "To become a watcher, like me. To see the world as it truly is, not as humans pretend it to be." I shook my head, taking a step back. No, I don't want that. I just want to be left alone." The creature's mouth twisted into what might have been a frown. "I'm afraid that's not an option, Jake. You've seen me now. There's no going back." It took a step forward, its long arms reaching out towards me. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. As its cold, gray hands touched my face, I felt a jolt of energy course through my body. Suddenly, the world around me changed. Colors became more vivid, shadows deeper. I could hear things I'd never heard before. the whisper of wind through grass miles away, the heartbeats of animals in the forest. And I could see everything, the true nature of reality, laid bare before me. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was too much. I screamed, the sound echoing across dimensions I didn't even know existed. The creature, the watcher, held me steady, its touch an anchor in the chaos of my expanding perceptions. "Easy, Jake," it said, its voice somehow soothing now. "The first moments are always the hardest, but you'll adjust. You'll learn to control it." As the initial shock began to fade, I found I could focus again. I looked at the watcher with new eyes, seeing it not as the monster it had appeared before, but as a complex being of energy and thought. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my new ears. The watcher's energy pulsed in what I somehow knew was a smile. "Now, Jake, you learn, you watch, and when the time comes, you choose the next one." As the implications of this sank in, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Fear, excitement, regret, wonder, all swirling together in a maelstrom of feeling. But underlying it all was a sense of purpose, of rightness, as if some part of me had always known this was my destiny. I took a deep breath, taking in the world with my new senses. "I'm ready," I said, surprised to find I meant it. The watcher nodded, extending a hand. "Then let's begin." As I took its hand, I knew my old life was over, but a new one, vast and strange and wonderful, was just beginning. And somewhere out there, a phone was ringing, waiting for someone special to answer. The streetlights flickered to life as I turned the corner onto my street, casting long shadows across the pavement. I quickened my pace, clutching my bag closer to my chest. It was later than I'd intended to stay at the library, and the walk home always felt longer in the dark. That's when I first noticed him. Just a glimpse in my peripheral vision, a figure in a dark hoodie, about half a block behind me. I told myself not to panic. It was probably just someone else heading home, same as me. But something about the way he moved, the purposeful stride, sent a chill down my spine. I picked up my pace, my heart beginning to race. The sound of my boots on the pavement seemed impossibly loud in the quiet street. I resisted the urge to look back, focusing instead on the intersection ahead, just 3 more blocks to my apartment. As I reached the corner, I chanced a quick glance over my shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. The hooded figure was closer now, maybe 20 feet behind me, and he was definitely following me. Panic surged through me. I broke into a run, no longer caring about appearing calm. The sound of heavy footsteps behind me told me he had started running too. My mind raced as fast as my feet. Should I scream? Try to flag down a car? My apartment was so close. But would I make it in time? I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it in my haste. Just as I was about to dial 911, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, wait up!" Despite every instinct screaming at me to keep running, I found myself slowing down. That voice, it sounded familiar. I turned around, my finger poised over the emergency call button. The hooded figure was jogging towards me, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. As he got closer, he pushed back his hood, revealing a face I recognized. "Mike!" I gasped, relief and confusion warring inside me. What the hell? Mike, my neighbor from 2 floors down, looked sheepish. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I saw you walking and tried to catch up. I wanted to return that book you lent me." He held out a paperback, the novel I'd loaned him last week. I took it with shaking hands, feeling slightly dazed. You chased me down the street at night to return a book," I said incredulously. Mike had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess that wasn't my brightest idea. I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how it would look until you started running." I let out a shaky laugh, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from my system. Well, next time maybe just wait until we're both at the building, okay? He nodded earnestly. Absolutely. Can I at least walk you the rest of the way home? I promised to stay a respectable distance behind. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Despite the scare he'd given me, I'd known Mike for years. He was harmless, if a bit socially awkward at times. As we walked the remaining blocks to our building, making awkward small talk about the book he'd just returned, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly fear had overtaken me, how easily an innocent situation had turned terrifying in my mind. But even as I chided myself for overreacting, a small voice in the back of my head whispered that I'd done the right thing, that it was better to be safe than sorry, because next time, it might not be a well-meaning neighbor behind me in the dark. We reached our building, and I bid Mike good night, my hands still trembling slightly as I unlocked the front door. As I climbed the stairs to my floor, I made a mental note to thank my parents for all those self-defense classes they'd insisted I take in high school. I hadn't needed them tonight, but the confidence they'd given me had probably prevented me from completely falling apart. Safely inside my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, letting out a long breath. The fear was fading, replaced by a sort of giddy relief. I was okay. It had all been a misunderstanding. But as I got ready for bed that night, I couldn't shake the lingering unease. The memory of those moments of pure terror, when I'd been certain I was being pursued by someone who meant me harm, stayed with me. I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, had me on edge. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and went to make myself a cup of tea. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I found myself drawn to the window. The street below was empty, streetlights casting pools of yellow light on the sidewalk. It looked peaceful, ordinary. Hard to believe that just a few hours ago, it had seemed so menacing. Movement caught my eye, a figure walking briskly down the opposite side of the street. My heart rate picked up for a moment before I forcibly calmed myself. It was probably just someone heading home from a late shift, or maybe an early morning jogger. But as I watched, the figure stopped abruptly. Slowly, they turned their head, looking directly up at my window. I stumbled back, my heart in my throat. There was no way they could see me. I was 4 stories up, the lights in my apartment off, and yet, I could have sworn. I forced myself to look again. The street was empty. No sign of the figure I'd seen. Had I imagined it? Was my mind playing tricks on me, still on high alert from earlier? I shook my head, trying to clear it. This was ridiculous. I was letting my imagination run wild. Tomorrow, everything would seem silly in the light of day. But as I finally crawled back into bed, mug of tea cooling on my nightstand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the world had become a slightly more dangerous place, full of shadows that might or might not be hiding something sinister. The next few days passed in a haze of hypervigilance. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, startling at sudden noises. I varied my route home from work, bought a can of pepper spray to carry in my bag. My friends noticed my jumpiness, but I brushed off their concerns. How could I explain that I was spooked by something that hadn't actually happened? It was a week after the incident with Mike that things took a turn for the truly unsettling. I was walking home from the grocery store, arms laden with bags, when I felt it again, that prickle on the back of my neck that told me I was being watched. I glanced around casually, trying not to look paranoid. The street was fairly busy, people going about their evening routines. Nothing seemed out of place. And yet, there, across the street and half a block behind me, a hooded figure walking at the same pace as me. My breath caught in my throat. It couldn't be. It had to be a coincidence. I picked up my pace slightly, heart hammering. In my peripheral vision, I saw the figure do the same. No, this wasn't happening. Not again. I turned abruptly into a small convenience store, pretending to browse the shelves while surreptitiously watching the street through the window. The hooded figure passed by without a glance at the store, continuing down the street. I let out a shaky breath. See? Just a coincidence. They hadn't been following me at all. I waited a few more minutes, then left the store, glancing nervously up and down the street. No sign of the hooded figure. Feeling slightly foolish but still on edge, I hurried the rest of the way home. It was as I was unlocking my apartment door that I saw it. A small piece of paper, folded and tucked into the frame. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. In neat block letters, it read, "I see you." My blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a prank, a coincidence, anything but what it seemed. I burst into my apartment, slamming and locking the door behind me. My groceries lay forgotten on the floor as I paced back and forth, my mind racing. Should I call the police? But what would I tell them? That I thought someone might be following me, but I had no proof. That I'd found a creepy note. But for all I knew, it could have been meant for someone else. I tried to calm myself, to think rationally. Maybe it was just a stupid joke. Maybe one of my friends was messing with me, knowing how on edge I'd been lately. But deep down, I knew. This was real. Someone was watching me, following me, and they wanted me to know it. The next few weeks were a nightmare of paranoia and fear. I saw the hooded figure everywhere, across the street, in store windows, always just at the edge of my vision. More notes appeared. Always watching. You can't hide. I'm getting closer. I stopped sleeping, jumped at every sound. My friends and family were worried sick, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what was happening. How could I, when I barely believed it myself? It all came to a head one rainy night. I was hurrying home, umbrella clutched tightly, when I saw him, the hooded figure, standing directly under a streetlight, facing me. No pretense of coincidence this time. I froze, terror rooting me to the spot. For a long moment, we just stood there, the rain pattering around us. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and beckoned to me. Something in me snapped. I turned and ran, blind panic driving me forward. I could hear footsteps behind me getting closer. I don't know how long I ran or where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get away, had to escape. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, spinning me around. I screamed, lashing out with my umbrella. "Whoa, hey, it's me, it's Mike." I blinked, the world coming back into focus. Mike stood before me, looking concerned and slightly winded. "Are you okay? I saw you running and you looked scared." I looked wildly around. The street was empty save for a few confused onlookers. No sign of the hooded figure. Did you see anyone following me?" I gasped out. Mike shook his head, looking puzzled. "No, it was just you. What's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks." The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving me shaky and confused. Had it all been in my head? Was I losing my mind? As Mike walked me home, gently probing for answers I couldn't give, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would get help. Talk to someone, a therapist maybe, because whether the threat was real or imagined, I couldn't go on living like this. But as we reached my building, I glanced back one last time, and there, in the shadows across the street, I caught a glimpse of a hooded figure, watching silently. Real or not, my nightmare was far from over. "Mommy, can you see my friend?" Emma's innocent question sent a chill down my spine. I turned to look where my 5-year-old daughter was pointing, but all I saw was the empty corner of her pastel pink bedroom. "What friend, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and curious. Emma giggled, as if I'd said something silly. "Mr. Whispers. Of course. He's right there, waving at you." I forced a smile, but my heart was racing. This wasn't the first time Emma had mentioned her friend, Mr. Whispers, but it was the first time she'd insisted he was physically present in the room with us. "Oh, I see," I lied, pretending to wave at the empty corner. "Hello, Mr. Whispers." Emma beamed, apparently satisfied that I'd acknowledged her invisible companion. As I tucked her into bed, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach. It started about a month ago, not long after we'd moved into this old Victorian house. Emma had always had a vivid imagination, so at first, I didn't think much of her new, imaginary friend. Kids her age often created such companions, right? But as the weeks went by, her stories about Mr. Whispers became more detailed, more unsettling. She said he was tall, much taller than Daddy, with long, spindly fingers and eyes that glowed in the dark. He only came out at night, she told me, and he knew lots of secrets about our new house. I tried to rationalize it. We'd moved to a new place. Emma was adjusting, and this was just her way of coping with the change. But as I kissed her goodnight and turned off the light, leaving only her little nightlight glowing softly, I couldn't help but feel like something was off. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to shake the image of Emma pointing at that empty corner. My husband, Mark, slept soundly beside me, oblivious to my concerns. He thought I was overreacting, that it was just a phase Emma would grow out of. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sound. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. It was old, after all, and made all sorts of noises. But then I heard it again. A soft, rhythmic tapping coming from Emma's room. My heart in my throat. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mark. The hallway was dark and seemed to stretch on forever as I made my way to Emma's door. The tapping continued, growing louder as I approached. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Part of me didn't want to open that door, didn't want to see what was making that sound. But my maternal instinct overrode my fear. I had to check on Emma. Slowly, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. Emma was sitting up in bed, her eyes wide and gleaming in the dim light of her nightlight. She was smiling, but it wasn't her usual happy grin. This smile was different, almost knowing. "Hi, Mommy," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "Mr. Whispers said you'd come." I flicked on the light switch, flooding the room with brightness. Emma blinked at the sudden illumination, but her eerie smile remained. "Emma, sweetie, what are you doing up?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. She tilted her head to the side, as if listening to something. "Mr. Whispers says you're scared," she said matter-of-factly. "But you don't need to be. He's nice." I forced myself to walk into the room, my eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. But there was nothing there. Just Emma's toys, her colorful drawings on the walls, her little bookshelf. "Where is Mr. Whispers now?" I asked, playing along while my mind raced with possibilities. Maybe Emma was sleepwalking, having some kind of night terror. Emma pointed to the closet. "In there. He likes the dark." I swallowed hard. The closet door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible in the gap. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving towards it. "Mr. Whispers," I said, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself. "If you're real, can you show yourself?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the closet door creaked open a little wider. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking. "Come here, sweetie. Let's go to Mommy and Daddy's room." But Emma didn't move. She was still smiling that unsettling smile, her eyes fixed on the closet. "It's okay, Mommy," she said. "Mr. Whispers just wants to be friends." As if in response to her words, something shifted in the darkness of the closet. A shadow that seemed deeper than the others. A shape that didn't quite make sense to my eyes. I wanted to run, to grab Emma and flee from that room. but I was rooted to the spot, unable to look away from that impossible darkness. Slowly, something emerged from the closet. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the clothes hanging inside. But then I saw the eyes, glowing, just as Emma had described, with an otherworldly light. A sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a scream. The thing, Mr. Whispers, unfolded itself, growing taller and taller until it nearly touched the ceiling. Its body was indistinct, more absence of light than physical form, but those long, spindly fingers that Emma had mentioned were all too real. "Hello, Mommy," it said, its voice a soft susurration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Emma's told me so much about you." I found my voice at last. "What are you?" I demanded, stepping in front of Emma protectively. "What do you want with my daughter?" The being tilted its head, an eerily human gesture for something so inhuman. "Want?" it repeated, as if the concept was foreign to it. "I don't want anything. I am simply here." Emma piped up from behind me. "Mr. Whispers has always been here, Mommy. He's part of the house." I glanced back at her, shocked by how calm she seemed in the face of this impossible creature. "What do you mean, part of the house?" The being, Mr. Whispers, moved closer, its form rippling like smoke. "Your daughter speaks the truth. I have dwelled in this place for longer than you can comprehend. I have seen families come and go, watched children grow, witnessed joy and sorrow, birth and death." My mind reeled, struggling to process what I was seeing, what I was hearing. But why? Why show yourself now? Why to Emma? Mr. Whispers' eyes seemed to soften, the glow dimming slightly. "Children see what adults cannot, or perhaps what they choose not to see. Emma saw me, acknowledged me. It has been a very long time since anyone has done that." I looked at Emma, who was now standing beside me, her small hand slipping into mine. She smiled up at me, a normal, childlike smile this time. "See, Mommy, he's not scary. He's just lonely." As I stood there, caught between terror and disbelief, a strange calm began to settle over me. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a sort of wonder. Here was something beyond my understanding, beyond what I thought was possible, and yet it wasn't threatening us. If anything, it seemed almost sad. I don't understand," I said, my voice steadier now. "What are you, really? A ghost? A spirit?" Mr. Whispers made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Those are human concepts, attempts to categorize that which defies categorization. I simply am. A consciousness bound to this place, aware of all that transpires within these walls." Emma tugged on my hand. "Can Mr. Whispers stay, Mommy? Please. He tells the best bedtime stories." I looked down at her, then back at the ethereal being that had emerged from my daughter's closet. Part of me still wanted to run, to pack up our things and flee this house and never look back. But another part, a part that was growing stronger by the moment, was curious, fascinated even. If we let you stay," I said carefully, "you won't harm us. You won't try to possess us or whatever it is that entities like you do." Mr. Whispers' form shimmered, and I got the distinct impression it was amused. "Harm you? No. As I said, I simply am. I have no desire to interfere with your lives, only to coexist, to be acknowledged, to share in the life of this house as I have for countless years." I took a deep breath, looking around the room. This house, which had seemed so perfect when we first saw it, now felt different. Not threatening exactly, but alive in a way I'd never considered before. Every creak, every shadow could be more than just the settling of old wood or the play of light. "All right," I said finally, surprising myself with my own words. "You can stay, but no more sneaking around or hiding in closets. If you're going to be part of this household, you do it openly." Emma squealed with delight, hugging me tightly. Mr. Whisper's form seemed to brighten, its edges becoming more defined. "Thank you," it said, its voice filled with genuine gratitude. "It has been so long since I've been part of a family." As I stood there, my daughter in my arms and an ancient, impossible being before me, I realized our lives had changed irrevocably. Our new home was more than just a house. It was a bridge between worlds, a place where the impossible became possible. And somehow, I knew that our story, the story of a family and their unusual, ethereal housemate, was just beginning. The security camera footage played on a loop, each repetition sending a fresh wave of chills down my spine. There I was, locking up the office at 11:23 p.m., briefcase in hand, clearly the last one to leave. Then, at exactly midnight, the lights flickered. When they came back on, every desk in the open plan office was occupied. Dozens of figures, hunched over computers, typing furiously. Their faces were blurred, indistinct, but their movements were unmistakably human. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if lack of sleep was making me hallucinate. But no, the footage remained unchanged. At 12:07 a.m., the lights flickered again, and the office was empty once more. No sign that anyone had been there at all. Mr. Thompson, the hesitant voice of our IT guy, Dave, broke through my daze. "Should I, call someone about this?" I shook my head, still staring at the screen. "No, not yet. Let's keep this between us for now. Can you send me a copy of this footage?" Dave nodded, looking relieved to not have to deal with this any further. As he scurried away, I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. What the hell had I just witnessed? I've been the night manager at Pinnacle Insurance for 5 years now. In all that time, the strangest thing I'd ever encountered was the occasional drunk employee trying to sneak back in to retrieve a forgotten phone. But this was something else entirely. The rational part of my brain tried to come up with explanations. A glitch in the system, some elaborate prank. But deep down, I knew. Something truly inexplicable had happened in my office last night, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't a one-time occurrence. That night, instead of heading home after my shift, I decided to stay. I told my wife I had a big project to finish, ignoring the concern in her voice. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I positioned myself in the security room, eyes glued to the monitors. 11:58, 11:59. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Midnight struck. The lights flickered, just like in the footage, and then my jaw dropped. The previously empty office was suddenly full of people. But these weren't my daytime colleagues. These figures were translucent, their edges blurred and shifting. They moved with an eerie purpose, typing on computers that I knew were turned off, rifling through files that should have been locked away. Fighting against every instinct that screamed at me to run, I stepped out of the security room. The sound of typing filled the air, accompanied by a low, constant murmur that I couldn't quite make out. None of the figures seemed to notice me as I cautiously made my way through the office. As I got closer, I realized I could see through them to the desks behind. Ghost workers, I thought hysterically. I'm looking at ghost workers. One of them turned towards me suddenly, and I stifled a scream. Where a face should have been, there was only a swirling mist. But somehow, I got the distinct impression it was looking right at me. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then, slowly, it raised a translucent hand and beckoned to me. My feet moved of their own accord, drawing me closer. The ghostly figure gestured to its computer screen. To my amazement, I could see text scrolling across it, lines of code or data that meant nothing to me. What is this?" I whispered, not really expecting an answer. To my shock, a voice responded, not out loud but directly in my mind. We work, it said simply, as we have always worked, as we will always work. But why? I asked, my voice shaking. Who are you? The figure's misty head tilted to one side. We are what remains, the echoes of dedication, of lives given to labor. We continue, long after our physical forms have gone. I looked around the office, really seeing it for the first time. How many people had worked here over the years? How many had poured their lives into these desks, these computers? The thought was both awe-inspiring and terribly sad. Can I help you? I asked, not sure what else to say. The figure seemed to consider this for a moment. You see us, it said finally. That is unexpected. Perhaps you can help. Yes, there is an error we cannot resolve. It gestured to the screen again. This time, I could make out what looked like a customer file. The name at the top read Emily Larson. This one, the ghostly voice said in my mind. Her claim was wrongly denied. We've been trying to correct it, night after night, but we cannot interact with the physical world enough to make the change. I stared at the screen, my mind whirling. Was this real? Was I really being asked by a ghost to correct an insurance claim? But as I looked at the file, I realized I recognized the name. Emily Larson had been in the news recently. A young mother, dying of cancer, whose insurance had denied coverage for an experimental treatment. The story had been heartbreaking, but it hadn't been my department. I hadn't given it much thought. With shaking hands, I sat down at the nearest physical computer and booted it up. The ghost workers around me paused in their tasks, all seeming to watch me. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their hope. It took me nearly an hour to find Emily Larson's file in our system. The ghost had been right. There had been an error, a simple clerical mistake that had snowballed into a wrongful denial. With a few keystrokes, I could correct it. I hesitated for a moment. This wasn't protocol. I could get in serious trouble for accessing and modifying files outside my purview. But then I thought of Emily, of her family, of these restless spirits, working endlessly to right a wrong. I made the change. As soon as I hit save, a collective sigh seemed to pass through the office. The ghost workers began to fade, their forms becoming more transparent by the second. The one who had spoken to me turned towards me one last time. Thank you, it said, its mental voice filled with relief and gratitude. We can rest now. And then they were gone. The office was empty and silent once more. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen where Emily Larson's updated file glowed softly. When I finally left the office that morning, the world seemed different, brighter somehow, but also more mysterious. I knew I could never look at my job, or any job, the same way again. The weight of our actions, the impact we have on others' lives. It all felt so much more significant now. I never saw the ghost workers again after that night. The security footage from midnight onwards was always blank, showing an empty office. But sometimes, when I'm working late, I swear I can hear the faint sound of typing, the low murmur of voices just beyond my hearing. And every now and then, I'll come across a file that just doesn't seem quite right. A claim that was denied on a technicality, or a customer who fell through the cracks of our system. When that happens, I think of Emily Larson, of the ghost workers who couldn't rest until an error was corrected, and I do what I can to make it right. I never told anyone else about what I saw that night. Who would believe me? But it changed me, changed how I approach my work and my life. I'm more diligent now, more aware of the lasting impact of every decision, every action, because now I know our work lives on long after we're gone. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get a chance to make a difference, to right a wrong, even from beyond the grave. As I lock up the office each night, I pause for a moment in the darkened space. Good night, I whisper to the empty desks, and thank you. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I hear a whispered thank you in return. The rhythmic drum of rain against the tent canvas was oddly comforting, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had fallen over our campsite. I zipped up my sleeping bag, trying to shake off the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the way the forest around us had gone unnaturally quiet. It was supposed to be a fun weekend camping trip, just me and 5 of my closest college friends, a chance to unwind before finals, to reconnect with nature and each other. But from the moment we arrived at this secluded spot deep in the Ozarks, things had felt off. It started with small things, items disappearing from our backpacks, only to turn up in strange places, whispers in the woods that didn't sound quite human. And then there were the symbols, crude, ancient-looking markings carved into trees around our campsite. We'd laughed them off as the work of previous campers, but now, in the dark of night, they seemed far more sinister. I checked my watch, 11:58 p.m. In 2 minutes, it would be Sarah's turn to take watch. I should wake her, but something kept me rooted in my sleeping bag. A sense of dread, a certainty that something was about to happen. The rain suddenly stopped, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Even the usual nighttime sounds of the forest, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals, were absent. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath. 12 a.m. I should really wake Sarah now. But as I reached out to shake her shoulder, a sound froze me in place. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching our tent. My heart hammered in my chest as I lay there, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps stopped right outside. A shadow fell across the tent wall, huge and misshapen. Not human, definitely not human. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, a voice spoke, low, gravelly, with a strange accent I couldn't place. Come out, wherever you are. We know you're in there, little ones." I bit back a scream, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a prank, right? Maybe the guys from the campsite next to ours trying to scare us. But deep down, I knew this was real, and we were in serious trouble. I nudged Sarah awake, pressing a finger to my lips when she started to speak. Her eyes widened as she took in my terrified expression, then darted to the shadow still looming over our tent. "What do we do?" she mouthed silently. I shook my head, at a loss. We were trapped in here, with no way to warn the others sleeping in the 2 other tents nearby. And whatever was out there clearly knew we were here. The voice came again, joined by others. They were speaking in a language I didn't recognize, harsh and guttural. Then, to my horror, I heard the sound of a zipper being slowly pulled down. They were opening our tent. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed Sarah's hand and lunged for the other side of the tent, tearing through the thin fabric with my free hand. We tumbled out into the cool night air, immediately scrambling to our feet. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. Surrounding our campsite were figures, tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to shift and blur in the moonlight. They moved with an unnatural grace, gliding rather than walking across the forest floor. One of them turned towards us, its face splitting into a grin that was far too wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Run!" I screamed, my voice finally breaking free. "Everyone, run!" Chaos erupted. My friends burst from their tents, confused and terrified. The creatures, for lack of a better word, moved with lightning speed, cutting off our escape routes. We scattered, crashing through the underbrush with no real direction, just a desperate need to get away. I could hear screams behind me, the sound of pursuit, but I didn't dare look back. Sarah's hand was still in mine, her ragged breathing matching my own as we ran for our lives. The forest seemed to come alive around us, branches reaching out to snag our clothes, roots rising up to trip us. It was as if the very land itself was working with our pursuers. We ran for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit never fading. My lungs burned. My legs ached, but terror kept me going. Finally, we burst into a small clearing. In the center stood a crumbling stone structure, some kind of old tomb or mausoleum. Without thinking, we made for it. The heavy stone door groaned as we pushed it open, slipping inside and slamming it shut behind us. In the pitch darkness, I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to survey our surroundings. The interior was small, bare except for a large stone sarcophagus in the center. Ancient symbols, similar to the ones we'd seen carved in the trees, covered the walls. "What the hell is going on?" Sarah gasped, sinking to the floor. "What were those things?" I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like them." A horrible thought struck me. "The others, do you think they—" Sarah's face crumpled. "I don't know. I heard screaming, but I didn't see." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I slumped against the wall, the reality of our situation sinking in. We were trapped in an ancient tomb, being hunted by creatures that shouldn't exist, with no idea if our friends were alive or dead. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Listen," she whispered. I held my breath, straining my ears. At first, I heard nothing. Then faintly, I caught it, chanting, in that same harsh language we'd heard earlier. It was getting closer. "They're coming," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to find a way out of here." We searched desperately for another exit, some hidden passage, anything, but the tomb was solid stone, with no windows and only the one heavy door. The chanting grew louder. I could feel it reverberating through the stone walls, making my teeth ache. Sarah and I pressed ourselves into a corner, as far from the door as we could get. Then, abruptly, the chanting stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Boom! Something slammed against the door, making us both jump. Boom! Again. "The symbols," Sarah said suddenly, pointing at the walls. They're glowing." She was right. The strange markings were emitting a soft blue light, growing brighter with each impact on the door. Boom! The door shuddered, dust raining down from the ceiling. It wouldn't hold much longer. In desperation, I turned to the sarcophagus. "Help me with this," I said to Sarah. Together, we pushed against the heavy stone lid. It didn't budge. Boom! A crack appeared in the door. "Please," I whispered, not sure who or what I was pleading with. "Please, we need help." As if in response to my words, the symbols on the walls flared brightly. The lid of the sarcophagus began to move, sliding aside with a grating sound. Sarah and I exchanged a terrified look. What had we done? Boom! The door splintered, moonlight spilling into the tomb. From within the sarcophagus, something began to rise. A figure, tall and imposing, wreathed in that same blue light that emanated from the symbols. As the creature outside finally broke through the door, the figure from the sarcophagus turned. I caught a glimpse of a face, ancient, powerful, with eyes that burned like stars. It spoke a single word, in a voice that shook the very foundations of the tomb. The creatures attacking us screamed, not in triumph, but in terror. There was a blinding flash of light, and then silence. When my vision cleared, the creatures were gone. The door was whole again, and the figure from the sarcophagus stood before us, its light dimmed but still present. "You awakened me," it said, its voice softer now but still thrumming with power. "You called for help and I answered. What are you?" Sarah managed to ask. The being smiled, an expression both terrifying and beautiful. "I am a guardian, set here long ago to protect against the very creatures that hunted you tonight. You did well to seek shelter here." "Our friends," I said, finding my voice at last. Are they? The guardian's expression turned somber. I'm sorry. You two were the only ones to reach my sanctuary. The others, their fate was not as fortunate. Grief and guilt washed over me. We'd survived, but at what cost? As if reading my thoughts, the guardian spoke again. Do not blame yourselves. You could not have known what lurked in these woods, but now you do, and with that knowledge comes responsibility. It turned, gesturing at the symbols on the walls. Learn these, understand them, for the creatures you encountered tonight are not the only threats that exist in this world. There are dark things that linger in forgotten places, and too few left who stand against them. The guardian began to fade, its light dimming. Go now. You are safe for the moment. But remember what you've seen here. Remember and prepare. For one day, you may be called upon to stand as guardians yourselves. With those words, it vanished, leaving Sarah and I alone in the tomb. We emerged into the pre-dawn light, shaken but alive. As we made our way back to what remained of our campsite, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives had changed irrevocably. We had glimpsed a world beyond our understanding, faced terrors I still couldn't fully comprehend, but we had survived. And with survival came a duty, a responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for, but knew I couldn't ignore. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, I made a silent vow. I would learn, I would prepare, and when the time came, I would stand against the darkness, just as that ancient guardian had done for us. The world was bigger and more dangerous than I had ever imagined, but now at least I knew it wasn't without protectors, and maybe, just maybe, I could become one of them. The mahogany grandfather clock in the foyer chimed midnight, its deep, resonant tones echoing through the cavernous halls of Blackwood Manor. I paused in my work, a shiver running down my spine despite the warmth of the study. Midnight. The witching hour, as my grandmother used to say. The time when the veil between worlds grows thin. I shook off the superstitious thought, chiding myself for letting old wives' tales get to me. I was here to do a job, after all. As the newly hired caretaker for the Blackwood estate, it was my responsibility to catalog and organize the vast collection of artifacts and curios amassed by generations of the eccentric Blackwood family. It was tedious work, but fascinating. Each item seemed to have a story, a history that hinted at adventures and mysteries I could only imagine. Ancient tomes bound in cracked leather, tribal masks with hollow eyes that seemed to follow me around the room, delicate clockwork devices whose purpose I couldn't begin to fathom. But it was the doors that truly captured my attention. 13 of them, scattered throughout the sprawling manor, each one unique, ornately carved with symbols and scenes that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, and each one, inexplicably, locked. I had asked about them when I first arrived. Of course, the family lawyer, a pinched-faced man named Hobbs, had been frustratingly vague. The doors are family heirlooms of a sort, he had said, his tone making it clear he considered the subject closed. You needn't concern yourself with them. Focus on cataloging the items in the accessible rooms. But I couldn't help my curiosity. In my 3 weeks at Blackwood Manor, I had tried every key I could find, searched for hidden mechanisms, even attempted to pick the locks, a skill I wasn't proud of, but one that had come in handy more than once in my line of work. Nothing worked. The doors remained stubbornly, mysteriously closed. Until tonight. As the last chime of the grandfather clock faded away, I heard it. A click, so faint I almost missed it, then another and another. 13 clicks, one after the other, echoing through the silent house. My heart racing, I grabbed the nearest lamp and stepped out into the hallway. The air felt different somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I made my way to the nearest of the 13 doors, a massive oak affair carved with twisting vines and blooming flowers that seemed to sway in an unfelt breeze. With trembling fingers, I reached out and grasped the handle. It turned easily under my hand, the door swinging open with a soft creak. Beyond lay impossibility. Instead of the dusty storage room I had expected, I found myself looking out over a vast moonlit garden. Flowers of every description bloomed in riotous profusion, their petals shimmering with an otherworldly light. The air was heavy with their perfume, sweet and intoxicating. I stepped through, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. The door opened into the center of the house. There was no way a garden of this size could exist here. And yet, here it was. I could feel the cool grass under my feet, hear the soft rustle of leaves in a breeze I couldn't feel. A movement caught my eye. Among the flowers, something was stirring. No, not something. Someone. A figure, lithe and graceful, dancing among the blooms. As I watched, transfixed, more figures emerged, twirling and leaping in a complex, silent ballet. They were beautiful, these dancers, but in a way that made my skin crawl. Their movements were too fluid, too perfect, and their faces. I realized with a jolt that they had no faces at all, just smooth, featureless expanses where features should be. I backed away, my wonder turning to fear. As I retreated, the dancers began to move towards me, their faceless heads turning in my direction. I scrambled back through the door, slamming it shut behind me. For a long moment, I stood there, my back pressed against the door, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. It had to be a dream, some kind of hallucination brought on by too many late nights and dust-filled rooms. But when I looked down, I saw petals clinging to my shoes, their unearthly glow already beginning to fade. Driven by a mixture of fear and fascination, I made my way to the next door. This one was made of a dark, almost black wood, carved with scenes of stormy seas and great, serpentine shapes lurking in the depths. I hesitated only a moment before turning the handle. A blast of salt air hit me as the door swung open. I found myself on the deck of a ship, ancient and creaking, tossing on a storm-tossed sea. Rain lashed at my face as I gripped the railing, staring out at the roiling waves. In the distance, something massive broke the surface, a vast, coiling shape, silhouetted against flashes of lightning. I watched in horror and awe as it rose higher and higher, until it seemed to blot out the sky itself. A great eye, glowing with eldritch light, fixed upon the ship, upon me. I felt the weight of that gaze, ancient and alien, and knew with certainty that I was looking at something that should not be, something that predated humanity, that would endure long after we were gone. The eye blinked, and in that moment of darkness, I threw myself back through the door, slamming it shut just as a massive tentacle crashed down where I had been standing. My legs gave out, and I slid to the floor, gasping for breath. The taste of salt lingered on my lips, the echo of that unearthly storm still ringing in my ears. It went on like this, door after door. Each one opened onto a different world, a different impossibility, a vast desert of purple sand, where great crystal spires sang mournful songs to a triple-mooned sky, a forest of flesh, where trees pulsed with a sickly heartbeat and fruits wept tears of blood when plucked, a city of impossible geometry, where gravity seemed to work differently on every street, and shadowy figures flitted between buildings that couldn't possibly exist in our reality. With each world I glimpsed, I felt my grip on sanity loosening. These places, these things I was seeing, they defied everything I thought I knew about the universe, and yet I couldn't stop. Some compulsion drove me forward, from door to door, even as my mind screamed at me to run, to flee this house of madness. Finally, I stood before the 13th door. It was different from the others, smaller, almost humble in comparison. made of a pale wood I didn't recognize. Its only adornment was a simple brass knob. I reached out, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grasp the knob. As I turned it, I braced myself for whatever fresh horror or wonder lay beyond. The door opened onto a study. My study. The very room I had been working in when the clock struck midnight. For a moment, I thought I had somehow circled back to where I started, but as I stepped through, I realized something was off. The room was a mirror image of my study, everything reversed. And there, sitting at the desk, was me. The other me looked up as I entered, a sad smile on his face. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," he said. What is this place?" I managed to ask. "What's happening?" My doppelganger sighed, setting down the pen he'd been writing with. "This is the end of the journey," he said, "and the beginning. You've seen what lies beyond, the world's hidden behind the doors. Now you have a choice to make." He gestured to the chair across from him. Numbly, I sat down. "The Blackwoods were more than just eccentric collectors," he continued. "They were guardians, keepers of the doors, protectors of the boundaries between worlds. For generations, they've stood watch, ensuring that what lies beyond stays beyond." I shook my head, struggling to process this information. But why me? Why show me all this? The other me smiled again, but there was no humor in it. "Because the last Blackwood is gone, the responsibility falls to you now. You can walk away, try to forget what you've seen, live a normal life, always looking over your shoulder, always wondering. Or, I prompted, though I feared I already knew the answer. Or you can take up the mantle, become the new guardian, keep the doors closed, protect this world from what lies beyond. But know this, once you accept, there's no going back. This will be your life, your purpose, until the day you die." I sat there for a long moment, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to run, to flee this house of wonders and horrors and never look back. But another part, a part that had been awakened by what I'd seen tonight, knew I could never truly walk away. "What do I need to do?" I asked, finally. My doppelganger nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. He pushed a piece of paper across the desk. A contract, I realized. At the bottom was a line for a signature. "Sign," he said simply. "Accept the responsibility. Become the guardian." With a hand that shook only slightly, I picked up the pen. As I signed my name, I felt something shift in the world around me. A weight settled onto my shoulders, a knowledge flooding into my mind. I understood now. The doors, the worlds beyond, the delicate balance that had to be maintained. I knew what I had to do. As the ink dried on the contract, my doppelganger began to fade. "Good luck," he said, his voice already distant. "The doors are in your hands now." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the study. My study. I could feel the doors now, a constant presence in the back of my mind. 13 worlds, 13 realities, all needing to be watched, guarded, kept separate from our own. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. I had work to do. The night was still young, and there were doors to check, boundaries to reinforce. After all, I was the guardian now, and the doors were waiting. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake, my heart leaping into my throat. For a moment, I lay frozen in bed, straining my ears in the darkness. There it was again, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on broken glass, coming from downstairs. I lived alone. Nobody else should be in the house. My mind raced as I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. Should I call the police? But what if I was overreacting? What if it was just the neighbor's cat that had somehow gotten in again? I'd feel like an idiot if I called 911 over a wayward feline. Swallowing hard, I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, and I winced at the sound. If there really was an intruder downstairs, I'd just announced my presence. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept propped against my dresser, a leftover from my college days that I'd never gotten around to storing properly. Now, I was grateful for my procrastination. Gripping the bat tightly, I crept towards my bedroom door. The house was eerily silent now. No more sounds of movement from below. Had I imagined it all? I eased the door open, cringing at the slight squeak of the hinges. The hallway beyond was pitch black, the darkness seeming to press in on me from all sides. I fumbled for my phone again, using its feeble light to illuminate my path. As I reached the top of the stairs, a floorboard creaked, not beneath my feet, but somewhere in the living room below. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was definitely down there. I should go back, I thought, lock myself in my room and call the police. But curiosity and a strange sort of determination propelled me forward. This was my house. I wasn't going to cower in fear while some stranger invaded my space. Slowly, carefully, I descended the stairs. Each step felt like an eternity, the wood groaning softly beneath my weight. I kept the bat raised, ready to swing at a moment's notice. As I reached the bottom, I saw it, a slash of moonlight cutting across the living room floor, coming from the broken window. Shards of glass glittered on the carpet, and there, silhouetted against the pale light, was a figure. My heart pounded so hard I was sure the intruder must be able to hear it. They were facing away from me, seemingly absorbed in examining something on my bookshelf. I opened my mouth, intending to demand they leave, but my voice failed me. Instead, a small, strangled sound escaped my throat. The figure whirled around, and I caught a glimpse of wide-eyed, startled eyes before instinct took over. I swung the bat with all my might. There was a sickening thud as it connected, followed by a cry of pain. The intruder crumpled to the floor, clutching their head, adrenaline surging through me. I fumbled for the light switch. As warm light flooded the room, I got my first clear look at the person I'd just struck. It was a woman, probably around my age. She was dressed all in black, a backpack lying beside her where she'd fallen. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, where the bat had connected. "Please," she gasped, her voice tight with pain. "I can explain." I stood there, bat still raised, my mind reeling. This wasn't how I'd imagined a home invasion going. Weren't burglars supposed to run when confronted? Why was she asking to explain? "You have 1 minute," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded, "before I call the police." The woman struggled to sit up, wincing as she did so. "My name is Sarah," she said. "I'm not here to rob you. I'm here because you're in danger." I barked out a laugh, harsh and humorless. "I'm in danger. You broke into my house." Sarah shook her head, then immediately looked like she regretted the movement. "Not from me. From them. The people who are watching you." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you talking about?" "Have you noticed anything strange lately?" Sarah asked, her eyes intense despite the pain she was clearly in. "The things moving around your house when you're sure you left them somewhere else? The feeling of being watched when you're alone?" I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was crazy. But unbidden, memories rose to the surface. The coffee mug I could have sworn I left on the kitchen counter, found in the sink. The constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck when I walked home from work. The shadows I sometimes thought I saw moving in my peripheral vision. "How do you know about that?" I whispered. Sarah's expression was grim. "Because I've been through it too. They're called the Watchers. They observe people, study them, and when they've learned enough, they take them." "Take them where?" She shrugged. "Nobody knows. But the people they take, they never come back." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. This was insane. It had to be. And yet, a part of me couldn't help but feel that Sarah was telling the truth. "Why me?" I asked. "Why are they watching me?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. They seem to choose at random, but once you're on their radar, there's no escaping their attention, not without help. I looked at her sharply. Is that why you're here? To help me? She nodded. I'm part of a group. We find people who are being watched and we extract them. Get them somewhere safe before the watchers can take them. My mind was spinning. This was too much to process. Part of me still wanted to believe this was all some elaborate hoax, or that I was dreaming. But the weight of the bat in my hands, the sting of adrenaline in my veins, it all felt too real. I need proof, I said finally. I can't just take your word for this. Sarah nodded, as if she'd been expecting this. She reached for her backpack, movements slow and deliberate. I tensed, gripping the bat tighter, but she simply pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a cell phone and a radar gun. This detects their surveillance equipment, she explained. Watch. She pressed a button, and the device came to life with a soft hum. Slowly, she panned it around the room. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as she pointed it at my TV, it emitted a high-pitched beep. There, Sarah said grimly. In your television. It's not just for watching shows, I'm afraid. I stared at my TV in horror. I'd had that set for years. The idea that it had been spying on me all this time. There will be others, Sarah continued. In your phone, your computer, probably even in your car, they're very thorough. I felt sick. My entire life, all my private moments, had been on display for who knew how long. What do we do? I asked, my voice shaking. We leave, Sarah said simply. Now, pack a bag, only essentials. Where we're going, you won't need much. I hesitated. How do I know I can trust you? This could all be some elaborate setup. Sarah's eyes softened. You don't. But ask yourself this. What's the alternative? Stay here, knowing you're being watched, waiting for them to come for you. At least with me, you have a chance. She was right, I realized. Whether her story was true or not, I couldn't stay here. Not now that the seed of doubt had been planted. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Give me 5 minutes. As I threw some clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag, my mind was reeling. How had my life changed so drastically in the span of an hour? This morning, my biggest worry had been a presentation at work. Now, I was preparing to flee my home with a stranger, running from an unseen threat I wasn't even sure I believed in. But as I zipped up my bag and took one last look around my bedroom, I knew I was making the right choice. Because if Sarah was telling the truth, and deep down, I feared she was, then staying here wasn't an option. I walked back downstairs, bag in hand. Sarah had managed to get to her feet, though she was leaning heavily against the wall. Ready? She asked. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I cast one last glance at my house. For all I knew, this could be the last time I ever saw it. Where are we going? I asked as we hurried down the street. Sarah's expression was grim but determined. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us. As we disappeared into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that my old life was over. Whatever lay ahead, whether Sarah's tale was true or not, there was no going back now. The watchers, if they existed, would have to find someone else to observe. I was done being a spectator in my own life. It was time to become the protagonist. The first time I saw my house on the dark web, I thought it was a mistake. There it was, my little blue colonial with the white trim and the slightly overgrown rose bushes out front, listed for sale on a site I'd stumbled upon while exploring the deeper recesses of the internet. The price? My life. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. But the image remained unchanged, my home displayed like a prized possession, in some twisted auction. Beneath the photo was a description that made my blood run cold. Current occupant, Sarah Jenkins, 28. Profession, journalist. Habits, runs every morning at 6 a.m. Favorite coffee shop, The Daily Grind on 5th Street. Best entry point, kitchen window, faulty lock. My hands shook as I scrolled through the listing, each detail more horrifyingly accurate than the last. They knew everything about me, my routines, my weaknesses, even the names of my closest friends and family. And now, apparently, they were selling this information to the highest bidder. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. This had to be some kind of sick joke, right? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. As a journalist specializing in cybercrime and the dark web, I'd seen plenty of disturbing things online. But nothing had ever hit this close to home, literally. For a moment, I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just seen. Then, as the reality of the situation sank in, panic set in. I needed to do something, to tell someone. But who? The police. Would they even believe me? With trembling fingers, I reopened my laptop, determined to gather as much evidence as I could. But when I navigated back to the site, it was gone. No trace of the listing, no sign it had ever existed. Had I imagined the whole thing? No, I decided. It had been real. And if it was real, it meant I was in serious danger. I spent the next few hours in a frenzy of activity, changing every password I could think of, covering my webcam with tape, even considering smashing my phone. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that it was too late. They already knew everything about me. How long had they been watching? And more importantly, who were they? As dawn broke, casting a pale light through my bedroom window, I made a decision. I couldn't stay here. Not in this house, not in this city. I needed to disappear, to become someone else entirely. I packed a bag with essentials, withdrew as much cash as I could from my bank account, and left a vague message for my editor saying I was taking some personal time. Then, with one last look at the home I'd loved for the past 5 years, I walked out the door. The first few days were a blur of cheap motels and constant movement. I ditched my phone, bought a prepaid one, and tried to break every routine I'd ever had. No more morning runs, no more visits to my favorite coffee shop. I became a ghost, leaving no digital footprint, paying for everything in cash. But even as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every security camera seemed to follow my movements, every stranger on the street a potential threat. Paranoia became my constant companion, whispering dangers in my ear at every turn. It was on the 5th day, in a dingy diner off some nameless highway, and that I saw it again. I was idly scrolling through news on a burner laptop when a pop-up appeared. My house, once again listed for sale. But this time, the description had changed. Target on the move. Last known location, Highway 16 heading west. Reward for current whereabouts. My blood ran cold. They were still tracking me, somehow. And now, they were crowdsourcing my location. I slammed the laptop shut, ignoring the curious glances from the other patrons. My mind raced. How had they found me? I'd been so careful, hadn't I? As I hurried out of the diner, my eyes darting nervously around the parking lot, a thought struck me. What if it wasn't about my digital footprint at all? What if they had other ways of tracking me? I remembered a story I'd covered months ago about implantable RFID chips. At the time, I dismissed it as fringe conspiracy theory stuff. But now, I ran my hands over my body, searching for any sign of surgical scars, any lump under the skin that shouldn't be there. Nothing, but that didn't mean it wasn't possible. What if they'd done it while I slept? What if it was in my food, my water? Stop it, I told myself firmly. You're spiraling. Think rationally. But rationality seemed to have left me somewhere back on Highway 16. Every passing car was a potential pursuer. Every glance from a stranger a silent threat. I needed help, I realized. But who could I trust? My colleagues at the paper? No, too risky. The police? They'd think I was crazy. My family? I couldn't bear to drag them into this. Then I remembered Tom, an old college friend who'd gone off the grid years ago, spouting warnings about government surveillance and corporate control. We'd all thought he was paranoid back then. Now I was starting to think he might have been onto something. It took some doing, but I managed to track down his last known address, a remote cabin in the mountains, miles from the nearest town. It was a long shot, but it was the only play I had left. The drive was nerve-wracking. Every mile felt like it could be my last, every bend in the road potentially hiding those who were hunting me. But finally, after hours of tense driving and a treacherous hike up a barely there mountain trail, I found it. A small, weathered cabin, nearly hidden among the trees. I approached cautiously, my heart in my throat. What if he wasn't here? What if this was all part of their plan? I was about to knock when the door swung open. There stood Tom, older and wilder looking than I remembered, a shotgun pointed squarely at my chest. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice gruff. "What do you want?" "Tom," I said, raising my hand slowly. "It's me, Sarah Jenkins, from college." Recognition flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Sarah, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" "I need your help," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "They're after me, Tom. They know everything about me. They're selling my information online. I didn't know where else to go." Tom studied me for a long moment, his grip on the shotgun never wavering. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. "You better come inside," he said. "Sounds like we've got a lot to talk about." The next few hours were a whirlwind of explanations and revelations. I told Tom everything, the listing, the chase, my growing paranoia. He listened silently, his expression grave. When I finished, he let out a long, low whistle. "You've stepped in it now, Sarah. Sounds like you've caught the attention of the Watchers." "The Watchers?" Tom nodded. "A shadow organization. They've been operating for years, gathering data on people, selling it to the highest bidder. Governments, corporations, criminals, anyone who's willing to pay." "But why me?" I asked, my voice small. "I'm nobody special." "You're a journalist," Tom pointed out, "and you've been poking around in places they'd rather keep hidden. My guess? You saw something you weren't supposed to see." I thought back to my recent investigations, trying to pinpoint what could have triggered this. Then it hit me, the story about data harvesting I'd been working on. I'd thought it was just another tech piece, but what if it was bigger than that? "So what do I do now?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. Tom's expression was grim. Now we fight back. We expose them, bring their whole operation crashing down." I stared at him, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. "How?" A slow smile spread across Tom's face. "I've got some ideas, but it won't be easy and it won't be safe. You sure you're up for this?" I thought about my old life, about the home and the routines I'd left behind. Then I thought about the listing, about being hunted like an animal. There was no going back now. "I'm in," I said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Tom nodded, a gleam in his eye. "Then let's get to work. We've got a war to win." As we bent over his computers, plotting our next move, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. My life had been turned upside down, everything I knew thrown into question. But for the first time since I'd seen that listing, I felt a glimmer of hope. The Watchers had picked the wrong target. They thought they were hunting me, but they had no idea what was coming for them. We were going to bring their whole world crashing down, and I was going to get my life back or die trying. The war had begun, and I was ready to fight. The moment I stepped into the abandoned asylum, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The air was thick with dust, and the unmistakable scent of decay, and an oppressive silence seemed to swallow every sound. But it was too late to turn back now. My friends were already disappearing down the darkened corridors, their excited whispers echoing off the crumbling walls. I hadn't wanted to come on this adventure in the first place. Urban exploration had never been my thing, especially not in a place with such a dark history. Lakeview Asylum had been shut down in the 1970s after a series of scandals involving patient abuse and unethical experiments. Local legends spoke of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena, but I had always dismissed such stories as nonsense. Now, standing in the decaying entrance hall, I wasn't so sure. "Come on, Alex," Jake called from somewhere ahead. "Don't be a chicken." Swallowing my apprehension, I clicked on my flashlight and followed the sound of their voices. Our beams of light danced across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture, creating shifting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. We made our way through what must have once been the administrative offices, then into the patient wings. Each room we passed told a silent story of suffering. Restraints still attached to rusted bed frames, faded photographs pinned to walls, personal belongings left behind in the hurried evacuation decades ago. It was in one of these rooms that I first felt it, a cold spot so intense it took my breath away. I paused, shining my light around the small space. "Guys?" I called out, my voice sounding small and frightened even to my own ears. "Did you feel that?" But my friends had moved on, their voices growing fainter. I hurried to catch up, not wanting to be left alone in this place. As I stepped back into the hallway, I could have sworn I heard something, a soft whisper, right by my ear. "Help us!" I whirled around, my heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just the empty corridor stretching out behind me. "Get a grip, Alex," I told myself sternly. "Your imagination is running wild." I quickened my pace, relief washing over me as I caught sight of my friends up ahead. They were clustered around a heavy metal door, excitement evident in their hushed voices. "Guys, I think we should go," I said as I approached. "This place is giving me the creeps." Jake rolled his eyes. "Don't be such a baby, Alex. We haven't even gotten to the good part yet." "Good part?" I echoed, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. Mia grinned, her face eerily illuminated by her flashlight. "The basement, that's where they did the experiments." Before I could protest, Jake had shouldered the door open with a rusty groan. The stairs leading down were steep and narrow, disappearing into inky blackness. "I really don't think this is a good idea," I said, but my objections fell on deaf ears. One by one, my friends descended into the darkness. With a resigned sigh, I followed. The basement was, if possible, even more oppressive than the floors above. The air was thick and stale, and our flashlights seemed to barely penetrate the gloom. We picked our way through rooms filled with ancient, ominous-looking equipment, things that looked more suited to torture than medical treatment. It was in one of these rooms that it happened. Jake was examining what looked like an old electroshock machine when suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. We all jumped, startled by the noise in the otherwise silent building. "Very funny, guys," Mia laughed nervously. "Who did that?" But one look at everyone's frightened faces told me that none of us were responsible. Jake tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," he said, a hint of panic in his voice. That's when the whispering started. At first, it was so faint I thought I was imagining it, but judging by the looks on my friends' faces, they heard it too. Countless voices, all around us, growing louder by the second. "Help us. Save us. Don't leave us here." The temperature in the room plummeted, our breath visible in the sudden cold. The medical equipment began to rattle and shake, as if coming to life after decades of disuse. Mia screamed, pointing to the far corner of the room. There, barely visible in the gloom, was a figure. It was hazy and indistinct, like a person made of smoke, but I could make out the outline of a hospital gown and what looked like restraints on its wrists. As we watched in horror, more figures began to appear. They filled the room, their whispers rising to a cacophony of pleas and accusations. You abandoned us. We suffered. It's your turn now. I felt ghostly hands grabbing at me, icy fingers brushing against my skin. My friends were screaming, but their voices seemed distant, drowned out by the spectral chorus. In that moment of terror, a memory surfaced, something I had read about the asylum's history. Many of the patients who died here had been unclaimed, buried in unmarked graves on the grounds. They had been forgotten, left to suffer even in death. Acting on instinct, I raised my voice above the supernatural din. "We're sorry," I shouted. "We didn't know. We'll make it right, I promise. We'll make sure you're remembered." For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then, slowly, the ghostly figures began to fade. The oppressive cold lifted, and the rattling equipment fell still. With a click, the door swung open. We didn't need any encouragement. We ran, scrambling up the stairs and through the decaying halls, not stopping until we burst out into the cool night air. As we stood there, gasping for breath, I knew our lives had changed forever. We had glimpsed something beyond our understanding, something that defied rational explanation. In the days that followed, we kept our promise. We researched the asylum's history, uncovering the names of patients who had died there. We worked with local historians to create a memorial, ensuring that those who had suffered and been forgotten would be remembered. And slowly, the nightmares began to fade. The feeling of icy fingers on my skin became less frequent, the whispers in the dark less insistent. But I never forgot that night in Lakeview Asylum. It taught me that there are things in this world that can't be explained, forces beyond our comprehension. It taught me the power of remembrance, of acknowledging past wrongs and trying to make them right. Most of all, it taught me to listen to that little voice of apprehension, the one that says, maybe this isn't such a good idea. Because sometimes, that voice knows more than we do. I never went urban exploring again. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I find myself drawn to the memorial we helped create. I stand there, reading the names of those long-dead patients, and I whisper a quiet apology. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel a gentle breeze, like a sigh of relief. A wordless thanks from those who can finally rest in peace. The abandoned asylum still stands, a decaying monument to a darker time. But now, thanks to our experience, it serves a new purpose. It reminds us of the importance of compassion, of remembering those who have been forgotten. And it stands as a warning that some places are best left undisturbed, some doors best left unopened, because you never know what might be waiting on the other side, longing to be set free. The old Polaroid camera felt heavy in my hands, its weathered surface cool against my skin. I had found it tucked away in a dusty corner of my grandmother's attic, a relic from a bygone era. On a whim, I had decided to take it with me on my solitary hike through the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. Little did I know that this innocuous piece of outdated technology would become the lens through which I'd glimpse a world beyond our own. The day had started like any other hiking trip. I had set out early, the morning mist still clinging to the ancient trees as I made my way along the winding trail. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds and small animals, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was the perfect day for photography, and I found myself snapping pictures of anything that caught my eye. A particularly gnarled tree trunk, a patch of vibrant mushrooms, a ray of sunlight breaking through the canopy. It wasn't until I reached a small clearing that things took a turn for the bizarre. As I raised the camera to capture the picturesque scene before me, I noticed something strange through the viewfinder. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, stood at the far edge of the clearing. It was motionless, its form seeming to blend with the shadows of the trees. I blinked, lowering the camera. The clearing was empty, just as it had been a moment ago. Confused, I raised the camera again. There it was, the figure, clear as day in the viewfinder, but invisible to my naked eye. My heart began to race. What was I seeing? Was the old camera malfunctioning, creating some kind of double exposure? Or was I glimpsing something that existed just beyond the veil of our reality? With trembling fingers, I pressed the shutter button. The camera whirred and clicked, spitting out a small square of film. I waved it in the air, waiting impatiently for the image to develop. As the chemicals did their work, an image slowly appeared. The clearing, just as I had seen it, but with one chilling addition. The figure stood there, its elongated limbs and featureless face sending a shiver down my spine. I looked up from the photo, scanning the clearing again. Nothing. Just trees and underbrush. No sign of the otherworldly being I had captured on film. Curiosity overcame my fear. I raised the camera again, slowly panning across the forest. Through the viewfinder, I saw them. More figures, some hiding behind trees, others standing in plain sight. They were everywhere, a hidden world teeming with life that was invisible to the human eye. I spent the next hour photographing everything I could. Each picture revealed more of this hidden realm. Creatures that defied description. Structures that seemed to exist in impossible spaces between the trees. Even what looked like doorways leading to places I couldn't begin to imagine. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, I realized I had wandered far off the trail. The forest around me was unfamiliar, darker and more primeval than the area I had started in. Panic began to set in as I realized I was lost. That's when I heard it, a soft, melodic humming coming from somewhere nearby. It was beautiful, enticing, unlike any sound I had ever heard before. Without thinking, I began to move towards it, drawn by its otherworldly allure. I pushed through a thick patch of ferns and found myself in another clearing. In the center stood a circle of stone monoliths, each one covered in strange, swirling symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And there, in the middle of the circle, was the source of the humming. It was one of the creatures I had been photographing, but this one was different. It was larger, its form more defined. As I watched, it turned towards me, and I felt its gaze upon me even though it had no discernible eyes. I raised the camera on instinct, my finger hovering over the shutter button. The creature tilted its head, an eerily human gesture. Then, to my amazement, it spoke. "You see us?" it said, its voice resonating in my mind rather than my ears. "You have pierced the veil." I found my voice, though it came out as little more than a whisper. What are you?" The creature's form shimmered, like heat rising from hot pavement. "We are the in-between," it said. "Neither here nor there, existing in the spaces between your reality and others." My mind reeled, struggling to process what I was hearing. Why can I see you now? Why couldn't I before? "The device you hold," it gestured towards the camera. "It is old. From a time when the boundaries between worlds were thinner, it allows you to glimpse our realm." I looked down at the Polaroid, then back at the creature. "Are you dangerous?" A sound like wind through leaves filled my mind. Laughter, I realized. "No more dangerous than your own kind," it said. "We have existed alongside you for eons, unseen and undisturbed. But now, you have seen us, and that changes things." A chill ran down my spine. "Changes things how?" The creature's form began to blur, becoming less distinct. "The veil has been pierced," it said, its voice growing fainter. "The boundaries will weaken. What was hidden may soon be revealed to all." "Wait!" I called out, but it was too late. The creature vanished, along with the stone circle. I found myself standing in an ordinary clearing, no sign of the otherworldly encounter I had just experienced. But I had proof. The stack of Polaroids in my hand, each one showing a glimpse of a world beyond our own. As I made my way back to the trail, guided by some instinct I couldn't explain, I knew that my life had changed irrevocably. In the days and weeks that followed, I pored over the photographs, studying every detail. I researched folklore and mythology, finding echoes of the in-between in stories from cultures around the world. I even tried to return to that clearing, but I never found it again. The Polaroid camera sits on my desk now, a constant reminder of what I discovered that day in the forest. Sometimes, late at night, I raise it to my eye and look around my darkened room. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of something moving just at the edge of the frame. I don't know what the future holds, or what it means that the veil between worlds is weakening. But I do know this. Our reality is far stranger and more wondrous than we ever imagined. And somewhere in the spaces between what we can see and what we can't, the in-between are watching, waiting for the day when they will no longer be hidden. As for me, I've become a guardian of sorts, keeper of a secret that could change the world. I don't know if I'll ever share what I've discovered. Perhaps the world isn't ready for such knowledge, or perhaps, as the boundaries continue to weaken, we'll all become aware of the in-between whether we're ready or not. Until then, I'll keep watching, camera in hand, ready to capture whatever glimpses of the unknown I can. Because once you've seen beyond the veil, there's no going back. The world is fuller, richer, and yes, perhaps more dangerous than I ever knew. But I wouldn't have it any other way. After all, how many people can say they've photographed the impossible? The first time I saw the numbers, I thought I was losing my mind. They appeared out of nowhere, hovering in the air above people's heads like some sort of bizarre, personalized halo. At first, I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, did everything I could to make them disappear, but they persisted, glowing faintly in my vision no matter what I did. It started on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was on my usual commute, sardined into a packed subway car, when I noticed a faint blue glow above the head of the woman standing next to me. As I focused on it, the glow resolved into a number, 43. I stared, bewildered, wondering if maybe I'd had one too many cups of coffee that morning, but then I noticed another number, floating above a businessman engrossed in his phone, 78, and another, over a teenager with bright blue hair, 16. Soon, I realized that everyone in the subway car had a number hovering over their head. Everyone except me. I got off at my stop in a daze, my mind reeling. As I walked the 2 blocks to my office, I saw numbers everywhere. Some were single digits, others stretched into the hundreds. They varied in color too. Most were that same faint blue, but some were green, yellow, even a deep, ominous red. By the time I reached my desk, I was convinced I was having some sort of mental breakdown. I considered calling in sick, going home, maybe scheduling an emergency appointment with a psychiatrist. But as I looked around the office, seeing the numbers floating above my coworkers' heads, a strange calm settled over me. If this was a hallucination, it was the most consistent, coherent one I'd ever heard of. I decided to approach it like the data analyst I was. I started keeping a log, noting down the numbers I saw along with any observations about the people they were attached to. At first, I couldn't discern any pattern. The numbers seemed random, with no correlation to age, gender, or any other visible factor. But as the days passed, I began to notice something strange. The numbers weren't static. They changed, usually slowly, but sometimes with alarming speed. I watched my boss's number tick down from 89 to 88 over the course of a week. My cubicle neighbors jumped from 32 to 45 overnight. It was about 2 weeks into this bizarre new reality when I finally figured it out. I was at lunch with my best friend, Sarah, watching her number, 62, as she told me about her recent breakup. As she spoke about her ex, her voice bitter and angry, I saw her number drop to 61. Then, as she moved on to talking about a new hobby she'd taken up, it rose back to 62. That's when it hit me. The numbers weren't random at all. They were measuring something. something that increased when people were happy or fulfilled, and decreased when they were upset or stagnant. It was like a gauge of life satisfaction, overall well-being. I wasn't sure of the exact metric, but I was certain I was onto something. Armed with this new understanding, I began to see the world differently. I noticed patterns I'd never seen before. The homeless man on the corner who always had a kind word for passers-by. His number was a steady 72, higher than many of the well-dressed professionals who hurried past him. The outwardly cheerful barista at my local coffee shop. Her 23 told a different story than her bright smile. I became obsessed with watching the numbers, trying to decipher what made them rise and fall. I saw numbers plummet during breakups and soar after promotions. I watched a woman's number jump from 40 to 65 when a stranger helped her with her dropped groceries. But with understanding came a heavy weight of responsibility. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Should I intervene when I saw someone's number dropping dangerously low? Was I obligated to help people increase their numbers? The question was answered for me about a month after the numbers first appeared. I was walking home late one night when I saw a young man sitting on a park bench. His number was a deep, pulsing red 3, the lowest I'd ever seen. Something about his posture, the defeated slump of his shoulders, set off alarm bells in my head. Before I could talk myself out of it, I approached him. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "You okay?" He looked up, startled. Yeah, I'm fine." I sat down next to him, ignoring every social convention that said you shouldn't bother strangers in parks at night. "You sure? You seem like you might be going through a tough time." He was quiet for a long moment, and I saw his number flicker between 2 and 3. Then, suddenly, he started talking. He told me about losing his job, his mounting debts, his feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. As he spoke, I watched his number, terrified it would drop to 1 or even 0, though I had no idea what would happen if it did. But something miraculous happened. As he talked, as I listened and offered what little comfort and advice I could, his number began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. By the time he'd finished talking, it was up to 15. Still low, but no longer that alarming red. "Thanks," he said as he stood to leave. "I don't know why, but I feel better. Like maybe things aren't as hopeless as I thought." I watched him walk away, his number a steady 15, and felt a mix of relief and awe. I had made a difference. A small one, perhaps, but a real one. From that night on, I made it my mission to help where I could. I didn't always intervene directly. Sometimes a small act of kindness was enough. Buying coffee for the person behind me in line, offering a genuine compliment to a coworker, volunteering at a local shelter. Each time, I watched numbers rise, even if just by a point or two. But it wasn't always easy. There were times when, despite my best efforts, numbers continued to fall. I watched helplessly as my aunt's number dropped steadily as she battled cancer, ending at a peaceful 5 before she passed away. I saw relationships crumble, dreams shatter, and the toll it took on people's numbers. And then there was the constant question, why me? Why was I the only one who could see these numbers? Was it a gift? A curse? Some sort of cosmic mistake? I had no answers, only an increasing sense of responsibility. As months passed, I noticed something else changing. Me. I found myself becoming more empathetic, more attuned to the people around me. I started to recognize the signs of a dropping number even without seeing it. A forced smile, a slump in posture, a tone of voice. I became a better listener, a more compassionate friend, a more engaged member of my community. My relationships deepened. My career flourished as my enhanced emotional intelligence made me a better colleague and leader. I felt more fulfilled than I ever had before. It was nearly a year after the numbers first appeared that I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror and gasped. There, floating above my own head, was a number, 89. A strong, steady blue. In that moment, I understood. The numbers hadn't appeared to drive me crazy or burden me with unbearable knowledge. They had appeared to teach me something about empathy, about the impact we have on each other, about the importance of human connection. I still see the numbers. I still do what I can to help people raise theirs. But now, I do it with the understanding that we're all connected, all part of this grand, complex system of human interaction. Each kind word, each moment of genuine connection, ripples out in ways we can't always see but are no less real. I don't know if the numbers will ever disappear, or if I'll ever meet someone else who can see them. But I do know this: even if they vanished tomorrow, I would still live my life the same way. Because now I understand the truth that the numbers were trying to show me all along. We all have the power to affect each other's well-being, for better or worse. Every interaction, no matter how small, has the potential to raise or lower someone's invisible number. And in the end, isn't that what life is all about? Not the pursuit of our own happiness, but the cultivation of joy and fulfillment in those around us. So the next time you interact with someone, remember, you might just be changing their number. Make it count. The day I discovered I could rewind time started like any other, but it ended with me holding the power of a god in my trembling hands. It was a crisp autumn morning, and I was running late for work. Again. As I rushed down the crowded city sidewalk, coffee in one hand and briefcase in the other, I didn't notice the patch of ice until it was too late. One moment I was upright, the next I was falling, my coffee arcing through the air in slow motion. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact, when suddenly everything stopped. The world around me froze, suspended in a single moment of time. Then, to my utter disbelief, it began to move backward. My body righted itself. The coffee flew back into its cup, and I found myself standing upright once more, several steps back from where I had slipped. As the world resumed its normal flow, I stood there, dumbfounded, trying to process what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was I having some kind of stress-induced hallucination? But no, there was the patch of ice, right where I knew it would be. This time, I carefully stepped around it, my mind reeling. I made it to work in a daze, going through the motions of my day while my thoughts raced. What had happened? How had I done whatever it was I had done? And more importantly, could I do it again? It wasn't until lunchtime that I got my answer. I was in the break room, heating up my sad desk salad in the microwave, when Dave from accounting walked in. Dave was, going to put it mildly, not my favorite person. He was loud, obnoxious, and had a habit of making inappropriate comments to the women in the office. As he swaggered over to the fridge, he called out, "Hey, Sarah, looking good today. That skirt really shows off your assets, if you know what I mean." I felt my cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. Before I could stop myself, I snapped, "Shut up, Dave. Your comments are disgusting and unwanted." The room fell silent. Dave's face contorted with rage. "Who do you think you're talking to, you little—" And then it happened again. The world froze, then began to rewind. I watched in amazement as Dave's words flew back into his mouth as he walked backward out of the break room. Time resumed its normal flow, and there I was, standing alone by the microwave once more. This time, when Dave entered, I was ready. I grabbed my salad and left before he could say a word, avoiding the confrontation entirely. As the day wore on, I experimented with my newfound ability. I discovered I could rewind time by up to 5 minutes, simply by concentrating hard and willing it to happen. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I corrected small mistakes, avoided awkward encounters, even managed to impress my boss by predicting a problem with our latest project before it occurred. But as I walked home that evening, the full weight of what I could do began to sink in. I had the power to change the immediate past, to erase mistakes, to undo harm, to reshape reality in small but significant ways. It was a power that could be used for great good or terrible evil. Over the next few weeks, I grappled with the moral implications of my ability. I used it sparingly, mostly for small, inconsequential things. Avoiding spills, dodging rude strangers on the street, catching falling objects before they shattered. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I should be doing more. Then came the day that changed everything. I was walking home from work, lost in thought, when I heard tires screeching. I looked up just in time to see a car careen onto the sidewalk, heading straight for a group of school children waiting at a bus stop. Without thinking, I reached for my power, desperate to rewind, to stop this tragedy before it happened. But to my horror, nothing happened. The world didn't freeze. Time didn't reverse. I was forced to watch, helpless, as the car plowed into the group. The next few minutes were a blur of screams, sirens, and chaos. As the dust settled, I saw the toll. 2 children dead, several more injured, and I had been powerless to stop it. In the days that followed, I was consumed by guilt and confusion. Why hadn't my power worked when it mattered most? Was it limited somehow? Or was the universe cruelly reminding me that some events were meant to be unchangeable? I became obsessed with understanding the limits of my ability. I tested it constantly, pushing the boundaries of what I could do. I discovered that emotional stress seemed to interfere with my power. The more upset or panicked I was, the harder it was to rewind time. I also realized that the farther back I tried to go, the more energy it required. Rewinding a full 5 minutes left me exhausted, barely able to stand. As I grappled with these revelations, I also struggled with the weight of responsibility my power brought. Every time I used it, I was altering the course of events, potentially changing lives in ways I couldn't predict. Was it right for me to play God like this, even in small ways? I found myself lying awake at night, imagining scenarios where my power could save lives, prevent disasters. But I also had nightmares about the consequences of changing too much, of unraveling the very fabric of reality with my meddling. It all came to a head about a month after I discovered my ability. I was at a coffee shop, taking a rare day off to try and clear my head. As I sat there, nursing my latte and people watching, I overheard a conversation at the next table. A man was on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "Yeah, it's all set," he was saying. "The bomb's in place. As soon as the mayor starts his speech, boom, it'll be chaos." My blood ran cold. A bomb? Was this man planning a terrorist attack? I looked at my watch. The mayor was scheduled to give a speech at City Hall in less than an hour. For a moment, I was paralyzed with indecision. Should I call the police? But what if they didn't believe me? What if they didn't get there in time? Then I remembered. I had the power to stop this, to rewind time and prevent this attack before it even began. But 5 minutes wouldn't be enough. I needed more time, more than I'd ever attempted before. Taking a deep breath, I focused all my energy, all my will, on rewinding time. The world around me blurred, events flowing backward at dizzying speed. I pushed harder, gritting my teeth against the strain. 15 minutes, 20, 30. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, everything snapped back into focus. I found myself standing outside the coffee shop, my phone showing the time as 45 minutes earlier than when I'd started. Without wasting a second, I dialed 911. "There's a bomb," I gasped out. "City Hall, the mayor's speech. You have to stop it." The next hour was the longest of my life. I waited, heart pounding, as police swarmed City Hall. They found the bomb, hidden in a potted plant near the podium. The would-be bomber was arrested trying to flee the scene. As I watched the news that evening, seeing the footage of the thwarted attack, I felt a mix of relief and terror. I had saved lives today, but at what cost? I could feel the toll the extended rewind had taken on my body. Every muscle ached, and a persistent headache throbbed behind my eyes. More than that, I was shaken by the immensity of what I'd done. I had fundamentally altered the course of events, changed history in a way that went far beyond avoiding a spilled coffee or an awkward conversation. The implications were staggering. In the days that followed, as the city buzzed with news of the foiled attack, I made a decision. I couldn't ignore this power, couldn't pretend it didn't exist, but I also couldn't use it recklessly. I needed rules, boundaries. I vowed to use my ability only in true emergencies, when lives were at stake. I would not use it for personal gain or to manipulate people's lives. And I would always consider the potential consequences of my actions. It's been a year since that day in the coffee shop. I've used my power a handful of times since then, to prevent a car accident, to stop a mugging, once to give a dying man a chance to say goodbye to his family. Each time, I feel the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that I'm tampering with the natural order of things. But I've also come to see my ability as a gift, a chance to make a real difference in the world. It's not always easy, carrying this secret, making these impossible choices. But when I look at the lives I've saved, the tragedies I've prevented, I know it's worth it. I don't know why I was given this power, or how long I'll have it. But for as long as I can rewind time, I'll do my best to use it wisely to make each moment count. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Make the most of the time we're given, whether we can control it or not. The mannequin's head turned to face me, its blank eyes boring into my soul. I froze, blood running cold, as I realized I was no longer alone in the department store after hours. What I had dismissed as an overactive imagination fueled by too many late nights was becoming a terrifying reality. It had started innocently enough. I'd taken the night shift at Marlowe's, an upscale department store in the heart of the city, to help pay for college. The job was easy, mostly restocking shelves and organizing displays after the store closed. The quiet solitude suited me, allowing me time to study or daydream as I worked. But 3 weeks into the job, things started to get weird. At first, it was small things. Items I could have sworn I'd put away appearing in different places. Mannequins that seemed to be in slightly different poses than I remembered. I chalked it up to fatigue and an unreliable memory. Then came the noises. Soft whispers that seemed to emanate from empty aisles. The sound of footsteps when I knew I was alone in the store. I started to dread my shifts, but I needed the money too badly to quit. That night, as I was arranging a new display in the women's clothing section, I heard it, a soft, mechanical whir like gears turning. I spun around, my heart pounding, to see a mannequin slowly rotating its head towards me. For a long moment, we stared at each other, my breath caught in my throat. Then, with jerky, unnatural movements, it began to step off its platform. I ran. Blind panic propelled me through the store, knocking over displays and sending clothes racks crashing to the floor. I could hear them behind me now. The clatter of plastic limbs, the squeak of unoiled joints. The mannequins were coming to life, and they were pursuing me. I made it to the staff room, slamming the door shut and barricading it with a chair. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, desperately dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency? Please, I gasped. You have to help me. I'm at Marlowe's department store. The mannequins, they're alive. They're trying to get me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ma'am, are you under the influence of any substances? No, I cried, frustration mingling with my fear. I know how it sounds, but I swear it's true. Please, just send someone. All right, ma'am. Stay calm. We're dispatching an officer to your location. As I hung up, I heard a new sound, scratching at the door. They had found me. I looked around wildly for a weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on a fire extinguisher in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The minutes crawled by, each second marked by the relentless scratching and thumping at the door. The chair was starting to move, the door inching open. Just as I was sure it would give way, I heard a new sound, sirens. Relief flooded through me. Help was here. I was saved. But my relief was short-lived. As the sirens grew closer, the assault on the door intensified. With a final, mighty crash, the barricade gave way. The door burst open, and they poured in, a nightmarish parade of blank faces and jointed limbs. I raised the fire extinguisher, prepared to go down fighting. But then, something unexpected happened. The mannequins didn't attack. Instead, they parted, forming a path. And through that path walked me. I stared in disbelief at my doppelganger. It, was perfect in every detail, from the small scar on my chin to the freckles on my nose. The only difference was the eyes, cold, lifeless, like the mannequins surrounding us. What are you? I managed to choke out. My double smiled, the expression not quite reaching its eyes. I'm you, it said, its voice an uncanny mimicry of my own. The new and improved version. We've been watching you, learning from you, and now, it's time for us to take your place. Horror dawned on me as I realized the full extent of what was happening. These weren't just mannequins coming to life. They were replacing people. How long had this been going on? How many others had been swapped out, their plastic doubles now walking among the unsuspecting public? Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My double tilted its head, considering, why does any species evolve? To survive, to thrive. Humanity has had its time. Now, it's our turn. The sound of footsteps in the store snapped me back to reality. The police had arrived. In moments, they would be here, and they would see, what? Me, wild-eyed and brandishing a fire extinguisher, or my calm, collected double. I had seconds to act. With all my strength, I swung the fire extinguisher, aiming for my double's head, but it was faster, stronger. It caught my wrist mid-swing, its grip painfully tight. Now, it chided, its tone mockingly gentle. There's no need for violence. This will be so much easier if you cooperate. Like hell, I snarled, bringing my knee up hard into its midsection. To my surprise, it doubled over, its grip loosening. Apparently, these things could feel pain. Taking advantage of its momentary weakness, I shoved past it and burst out of the staff room. I could hear shouts now, the police calling out as they searched the store. Here, I screamed. I'm here. Help. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with two officers, their flashlights momentarily blinding me. Ma'am, one of them said, lowering his light. Are you all right? We received a call about a disturbance. Before I could respond, I heard my own voice behind me. Oh, thank goodness you're here, officers. I turned to see my double approaching, its face a mask of concern. The mannequins were nowhere to be seen. This woman, my double said, gesturing to me. She broke in. I found her in the staff room, ranting about living mannequins. I think she might be on drugs. What? No, I protested. That's not true. I work here. She's the imposter. The officers exchanged glances, their hands moving to their weapons. All right, let's everybody calm down, one of them said. We're going to need to see some identification. My heart sank. My ID was in my bag, which was still in the staff room. I watched in helpless rage as my double smoothly produced a wallet, handing over a driver's license that was, of course, identical to mine. This is insane, I said, my voice shaking. Look, I can prove I work here. Call the manager. Check the security footage. You'll see I'm telling the truth. We'll sort this all out down at the station, the officer said, his tone not unkind but firm. For now, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. As they led me away, I caught one last glimpse of my double. It smiled and waved, a perfect picture of innocence. I wanted to scream, to fight, to make them understand. But I knew how it would look. A crazy woman, raving about living mannequins, resisting arrest. The ride to the police station was a blur. I answered their questions mechanically, my mind racing. How could I prove what had happened? Who would believe me? And more importantly, how many others were out there? Plastic imposters living among us. As they processed me, taking my fingerprints and mugshot, a chilling thought occurred to me. What if it wasn't just my double out there? What if some of these officers, these people around me, weren't human either? I spent the night in a holding cell, alternating between panic and a numb sort of acceptance. By morning, they had verified my identity and employment at Marlowe's. The manager, looking confused and annoyed, came to pick me up. "I don't know what kind of stunt you were trying to pull," he said as we drove back to the store. "But if it happens again, you're fired." "Understood." I nodded mutely. What could I say? That his store was ground zero for an invasion of sentient mannequins, that one of them had taken my place, and was probably there right now, folding sweaters and helping customers as if nothing had happened. As we pulled into the parking lot, I saw her, me, walking into the store. Our eyes met for a brief moment. It smiled and waved, just as it had the night before. I got out of the car on shaky legs. I could walk away now, go home, try to forget this ever happened, move on with my life. But I knew I couldn't. Whatever was happening, whatever these things were, I had to stop them. Somehow. "Are you coming?" my manager called, already halfway to the entrance. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Yeah," I said, "I'm coming." As I walked into the store, my eyes scanned the mannequins in their perfect poses, their blank faces revealing nothing. But now I knew the truth, and I was going to find a way to expose it, no matter what it took. The battle for humanity had begun, and I was the only one who knew it was happening. God help us all. The mirror rippled like water as my fingers passed through its surface, sending chills down my spine. I yanked my hand back, heart pounding, and stared at my reflection. It stared back, unmoving, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But I knew what I'd felt. The mirror in my grandmother's attic was no ordinary mirror. It was a portal to somewhere else. I'd always known there was something special about Gran's house. As a kid, I'd spend summers here, exploring the creaky old Victorian with its hidden nooks and mysterious artifacts. Gran had been an archaeologist, traveling the world and bringing back all manner of strange souvenirs, but she'd always been particularly secretive about the attic. "Not until you're older," she'd say whenever I begged to see what was up there. Well, I was older now, 25 and fresh out of grad school. I'd come to help clean out the house after Gran's passing. The attic key burned in my pocket as I climbed the narrow stairs, dust motes dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, maybe some valuable antiques or journals detailing Gran's adventures. What I didn't expect was a room full of mirrors. They lined the walls, propped against old trunks, hanging from the rafters. Mirrors of every shape and size, their frames ornate and ancient. But it was the one in the center of the room that caught my eye. Taller than me, with a frame of twisting silver vines, it seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. As I approached, my reflection shimmered and distorted, like I was looking at myself underwater. Fascinated, I reached out to touch the glass, and my fingers slipped through as if it wasn't there at all. Now, as I stood there trying to process what had just happened, 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Was this some kind of hallucination? A trick mirror Gran had picked up on her travels? Or was it something far stranger? There was only one way to find out. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and stepped forward. For a moment, there was resistance, like pushing through a membrane. Then, with a sensation like plunging into cold water, I was through. I found myself in a forest, but like no forest I'd ever seen. The trees towered impossibly high, their trunks a deep purple, leaves shimmering with an inner light. The air was thick and sweet, filled with floating spores that glowed softly. Behind me stood the mirror, looking bizarrely out of place among the alien flora. "Oh my God," I whispered, turning in a slow circle. "Gran, what did you find?" As if in answer, I heard a rustle in the underbrush. Something was moving towards me, something big. Panic seized me, and I scrambled back towards the mirror. But before I could reach it, a figure emerged from between the trees. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and slender, with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to swirl with galaxies. It regarded me with what I could only interpret as curiosity. Hello?" I managed, my voice shaking. "I come in peace?" The being tilted its head, then spoke. Not with words, but with a series of musical tones that somehow formed thoughts in my mind. "Welcome, traveler," it said, sang. "It has been long since one of your kind has crossed the veil." "My kind?" I asked. "You mean humans? Has my grandmother been here?" The being's eyes swirled faster. "The elder one. Yes, she walked among us many cycles ago. She learned much, and left us with much to ponder." My mind reeled. Gran had actually been here, to this impossible place. How many times? What had she discovered? "I don't understand," I said. "What is this place? How did she find it?" "This is but one realm of many," the being explained. "Your elder one stumbled upon the crossing point by chance, as humans sometimes do. But she returned many times, seeking knowledge." I looked back at the mirror, understanding dawning. The mirrors, they're all portals, aren't they? To different realms. The being made a sound like wind chimes, which I took to be affirmation. "The veil between worlds is thin in some places. Your kind has long sensed this, building myths around these crossing points. But few have the ability to truly see, to step through." I thought of all the mirrors in Gran's attic. How many worlds had she visited? What wonders had she seen? "Can you show me?" I asked, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. "Can you teach me what my grandmother learned?" The being regarded me for a long moment, its swirling eyes seeming to peer into my very soul. Then it extended a hand, long-fingered and webbed, but recognizably a hand. "Come," it said, sang. "There is much to see." What followed was a whirlwind tour of a universe far stranger and more wonderful than I had ever imagined. We passed through mirror after mirror, each one leading to a new realm of impossibilities. I saw a world where gravity ran sideways, cities built along vertical cliffs. Another where time flowed backwards, the inhabitants living their lives in reverse. There were oceans of living metal, forests of crystalline trees that sang in the wind, deserts where the sand was made of tiny machines that rebuilt the landscape each night. In each realm, there were beings, some humanoid, others defying description, but all of them knew of humans, of the rare few who had crossed the veil. And all of them spoke of my grandmother with a mix of reverence and awe. The elder one brought wisdom. A creature of living flame told me in a world of endless volcanoes. She taught us of your science, your art. She learned our songs, trilled a being of pure sound in a realm of music, and left us melodies of her own. Everywhere we went, I saw signs of cultural exchange, Earth artifacts in alien museums, human concepts integrated into alien philosophies, and in return, Gran had brought back knowledge beyond imagining. As we traveled, my guide, who I came to know as Arya, taught me the basics of veil walking, how to sense the thin spots between worlds, how to navigate the paths between mirrors. It was dizzying, exhilarating, and more than a little terrifying. Your grandmother had a rare gift, Arya told me as we rested in a meadow of bioluminescent grass. She could see the threads that connect all things, across all realms. It is a talent few humans possess. I plucked a glowing blade of grass, watching it pulse in my hand. Do I have it? This gift? Arya's eyes swirled thoughtfully. The potential is there, but it must be developed, nurtured. Your grandmother spent many cycles honing her abilities. I thought of the life I'd left behind. My job, my friends, my plans for the future. All of it seemed small and insignificant compared to the wonders I'd seen. I want to learn, I said, the determination in my voice. I want to see everything, understand it all. Oh, Arya made the wind chime. Oh, it is a path few would choose. To walk between worlds is to be forever changed. You will see things that will challenge everything you believe. You will face dangers beyond imagining. I nodded, a mix of fear and excitement churning in my gut. I understand, but I have to try. For Gran, if nothing else. Very well, Arya said, saying, then let us begin your true education, young one. We spent what felt like weeks traveling the realms, though time moved strangely between worlds. Taught me the secret languages of the Veil, the mathematics of interdimensional travel, the history of the multiverse itself. I learned of the Council of Realms, a sort of interdimensional United Nations that Gran had helped establish. I discovered only beings who could cross the Veil, but we were among the rarest, and everywhere we went. With my grandmother, how she had brokered peace between warring realms, introduced revolutionary ideas, pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. She hadn't just been an archaeologist. She had been a pioneer, an explorer of realities. As my training progressed, I began to see what Arya had meant about being changed. My perception of reality itself shifted. I could sense the ebb and flow of interdimensional energies, could see the gossamer threads connecting all things across all realities. But with this expanded awareness came a growing sense of responsibility. Gran hadn't just explored these realms. She had become a vital part of this vast, interconnected multiverse. And now, it seemed, that mantle was being passed to me. Finally, after what might have been months or years, Arya brought me back to the forest where we'd first met. The mirror still stood there, a window back to my own world. You have learned much, young one, Arya said, sang, but this is only the beginning. The path of a Veil Walker is long and fraught with challenges. I nodded, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. What happens now? Now, you must choose. You can return to your world, armed with the knowledge you've gained. Or you can continue on this path, becoming a true Veil Walker like your grandmother. I stared at the mirror, thinking of the life I'd left behind. It felt like a lifetime ago. Could I really go back to that, knowing what I knew now? Could I walk away from the wonders I'd seen, the responsibility I'd inherited? But as I gazed into the mirror, I saw not just my reflection, but the countless realms beyond. I saw the threads connecting all things, the vast tapestry of the multiverse, and I knew there was only one choice I could make. I'm staying, I said, turning back to Arya. There's too much to learn, too much to do. Gran's work isn't finished. Arya's eyes swirled with what I now recognized as approval. Then let us continue, young Veil Walker. The multiverse awaits. As we turned away from the mirror, walking deeper into the alien forest, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never known before. Gran had left me more than just a house full of strange artifacts. She'd left me a legacy, a mission, and I was ready to embrace it, whatever wonders and dangers lay ahead.